Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Check, check. Can you hear me?
Mhm. Can you hear me?
Yes. Everything sounds good on my end.
All right.
So
You
yes,
ready
it's
to
getting
do this?
believe so. I'm just getting a couple of things pulled up. Let's see. Come on. Have you seen that new research tool called the web?
Yeah, it's a new one.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the naming choice.
Uh, they've actually got a new tool out named the Web.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, named after Gary Webb.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
And
that tracks.
right. And it's supposed to it was invented so that you could use AI in order to parse through all 3 million Epstein files. And so you ask it like a normal, just plain English question, and it answers you in plain English, but it provides you the source to the documentations.
Oh, that's pretty good. I will definitely have to check that out. Using AI for good as opposed to building Skynet.
Right, right.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to read us in real quickly. Today, I am honored to have Jacob K. Johnson of Rise to Liberty on IRA's live stream, and we will be examining the McMartin preschool case. And I wanted to have you on, Jacob, because ultimately I saw some coverage you did on that case, and I was like, well, that would just be perfect. That's right in the wheelhouse of what we do here at Investigations in Ritual Abuse. And there is a ritual abuse component to those allegations. So we wanted to include coverage of that little break from the norm of David Lee Hamblin on the brain all the time. So without further ado, I mean, how'd you come across the source material that you were using that really a lot of us, I think, have not heard about, particularly the McMartin scientific report, which was commissioned by the parents of the alleged victims and written by E. Gary Stickle, or Dr. E. Gary Stickle of UCLA, I believe it was.
Right. So I mean I came across it because over on my channel, I do a series um called Satanic Panic is Real. And so just through researching just the satanic panic in general, you are always going to come across somebody by the name of Ted Gunderson. And he's a rather well known figure, kind of in this vein of research, anyways. And so I came across his website, um, which features a document. It's a archaeological survey and excavation done at the McMartin preschool site. So this is kind of how I came across the document, and it's it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because Ted Gunderson is a very interesting figure. Now, my personal opinion is that Ted Gunderson is a disinformation agent,
Why do you
meaning
say that?
so meaning there's a lot of there's a lot of really interesting facts that we don't typically know about Ted Gunderson. So, for instance, he was in direct communication with Michael Aquino, especially during his tenure during the McMartin stuff, every single day.
So
Um,
explain to our viewers who may not know who Michael or Lieutenant Colonel, I believe it is, Michael Aquino
correct.
is.
So, Lieutenant Michael Aquino is a self-avowed and very public Satanist. Um, kind of I guess I would say Satanism TM or Satanism copyright, you know. Um, so Michael Aquino started his journey with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Michael Aquino started there with him until one day when Anton LaVey ran an article or ran a an advertisement to where people could just purchase a I guess like
The
a high
priesthood
priest. You're
ordination.
right, right. The priesthood. And this really upset Michael Aquino because, you know, these two LARPers really kind of wanted well, Anton LaVey wanted something different. I think it's kind of spot on for a Satanist to sell a priesthood. And Michael Aquino did not like that. So he decided to leave and start his own uh, satanic club, I guess, which is known as the Temple of Set. This is a man who, like you said, is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, or was when he was still alive, and he really kind of cut his chops in Vietnam with the Phoenix program. This is where he really kind of developed his um, developed his ideas and his techniques for what's known as mind war. So he is a psychological warfare expert. He literally wrote the book on it, or at least co-authored the book. Um, so this is a very well-known thing about him. But in the 80s, he got brought on to like Geraldo and all of these daytime talk shows as a Satanist expert because he was a member of the U.S. military, but an open, avowed member of a satanic coven. I guess. I guess is what you would call it. I mean, there all of these
Pylon is
terms,
what the
right?
Temple of Set calls their little units.
Right. I mean, they're kind of all like interchangeable. I mean, there's not really a huge difference between a cult, a coven, you know, at least from my perspective. And just for a little background on myself as well as I am also a former Satanist. I ran into a couple of members of the Temple of Set. These are very interesting people.
Oh yeah.
Some of the nerdiest nerds I think I've ever met.
Oh yeah, it's you meet quite a few of them down in Austin, Texas, where I used to live.
Oh, I bet. I bet. Keep Austin weird, am I right?
Yeah, Don Bradley, I think, who was Michael Aquino's direct successor as the Grand High Poobah of the Temple of Set. He spoke at a kind of a countercultural bookstore down on the corner of Guadalupe, across from UT. And he calls himself Uncle Sekdak or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, he's kind of this grandfatherly figure, but he's a theistic Satanist, and a lot of LaVeyan Satanists are not theistic at all. They're
Correct.
atheistic. And so there's this big bifurcation in the satanic community, as it were, um, between the people who believe in Satan as an ideal to
Right.
follow, which is basically a symbol that signifies human hedonism and human impulse and human nature being deified almost. Um, and then theistic Satanists who believe that Satan is a literal entity.
Right.
And so when Aquino broke off from the Levian Temple of Satan or Church of Satan, um, he then founded the Temple of Set. He wrote a book, I believe it's called The Book of Coming Forth by Night,
Correct.
which was his revelations um, in contact with a satanic entity that he named Set, hence the Temple of Set. And then, of course, within the Temple of Set, which is never more than a few hundred members at a time worldwide, it's a very fringe group. There was also like an OTO chapter outside of Austin. And
Interesting.
oh yeah, I mean Austin's really big into the occult. There's a Gnostic church up in Round Rock, Texas. A lot of esotericists flock to Austin in the state of Texas precisely because they can have a variety of communities in that city. There's
Right.
of course the big Scottish Rite shrine, the Scottish Rite Temple up
Right.
up on the northern corner, I believe, of Guadalupe, up from UT, and that's actually where I came across that Gnostic church because I attended one of the talks that was given by one of their head guys. I think his last name was Wheeler. So let me verify that real quickly. I want to say, yeah, so you basically have the Ecclesia Gnostica and other little offshoots of it. Um, I believe Ecclesia Gnostica was the one that I went into and um, basically went and attended like a presentation by one of their guys. I think Stephen A. Holler was his name. Let me look him up real quickly. Yeah, that's him. Stephen A. Holler, Hoeller. And it was an interesting time. He was much more articulate. I went there to troll, to be quite honest. He was actually a really good speaker. Had some good points and whatnot, and I wound up being pretty captivated by him. He was an old guy, even back then, and this was, before my daughter was born. So this was
Right.
pre 2018. Um, and I just had some time to kill. My marriage was falling apart, and that tends to happen when, you know, you have a marriage that's falling apart. You have a lot of time on your hands because your wife
Right.
doesn't want to be around you anymore. Um, so I just decided I'd go to downtown Austin, I believe on a Friday night, and see this guy speak, and it was like all the Gnostics and weirdos, and they were honestly pretty conventionally looking people. Like I was always surprised by that, almost as surprised as I was like when I first went off to college and I met gay people for the first time.
Right.
And they were nothing like my dad had described. Um, so they all look like accountants and bookkeepers and that sort of thing and live pretty boring lives, nothing like you see on television and movies.
Right.
And they were pretty normal people. And then, of course, most of them weren't dandies. They were as big of an idiot as I was. And they liked beer and cheese and sports and wings and all
Right.
the things that
Right.
regular people liked, except they were gay. And so then I realized you have to go out west to like California or up to New York to get the exotic gays.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
Alabama gays are not. Alabama gays in the 90s and early 2000s are not all that out there. They're
Right.
pretty conventional people. But shout out to those guys. I miss those guys. Rest in peace to Big Gay Drew and Bubba Chuck. Big Gay Drew died during COVID, I believe. and I think Bubba Juck is his widower. I guess that's what you'd call it. But ultimately, Big Gay Drew, I met him in college, otherwise known as Drucifer when he drank. And a lot of fun, back in my heathen days when I drank and
Right.
I was a reprobate. But, a lot of the people that I met in Austin who were quote unquote Satanist or esotericists were the same way. Very conventional, very
Right.
buttoned down. Um, just you would never know looking at them that they worship Satan or the goddess or anything else.
Right. This is something I've pointed out on my channel before too. Is most Satanists, a vast majority, I would say, at least through my personal experience, most of them are going to be really normal. Um, and most of them are like just genuine normal people, you know? They're not they're not like this cartoon that some people have envisioned in their heads, like what Satanists are. Now, I'm not
No.
saying that those people don't exist because they do, but it's just like your average Satanist that you come across. It's just going to be like anyone else. They just might dress different.
Yeah. So, according to you, Ted Gunderson, FBI agent who shows up in all the wrong places, the Finders case, of course, this McMartin preschool case, and so on and so forth. He's in daily contact with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, the psychological operations specialist who wrote Mind War, and who also has his own connection to a daycare scandal on the Presidio base, which, that's another episode that we may do
Yeah,
later.
would
Yeah.
love to.
But ultimately, he's in contact with Michael Aquino, and you know more about that than I do. So, why is Ted Gunderson in contact with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino? Aquino, I never can get his name right.
Aquino.
Uh, Aquino, during the pendency of this investigation in the McMartin preschool allegations.
So that we actually don't have an answer to. I would love one, honestly. Now, the reason we know this is through a statement that was made. Oh, and her name is escaping me at the moment. Of course, it would be. Um, Ted Gunderson was actually shacking up with one of the mothers of the McMartin preschool trial.
Oh
So
my.
yes, yes, and let's see. Like I said, I can't. Her name is escaping me for a moment. I'll see if it comes to me. But um, he was shacking up with one of the single mothers, and she's the one that made the statement because she overheard him on the phone with Michael Aquino daily. So, exactly why is Ted Gunderson speaking to Michael Aquino? I mean, for them to ever have a conversation, I don't think it's suspicious. I think it's suspicious that they would be on the phone daily while Ted Gunderson is allegedly attempting to help the parents of McMartin. Um, now, this archaeological dig, I find this kind of interesting. This was not commissioned by Ted Gunderson, although he does like to take credit for it because that's
Hmm.
just kind of the man he is or was. And apparently, they had started the dig without him, and apparently, he did not like that very much. So, from second and third hand reports, so take that for what it is. Uh, these reports claim that he was very upset about this, and so when he got to the site, he was kind of like a raving madman, kind of a acting like a lunatic. Of why would they do this without him? Why would they do this? Why would they not do that? Why would they not get a hold of him? Because apparently this is the Ted Gunderson show. Um, it's not about the truth. Um, Now, there's certain people that like worked with Ted. Um, Particularly the one that comes to mind is Gregory R. Reed. He wrote a so far wonderful book called The Real Satanic Panic Story. Um, and he's said in interviews before that he believes that Ted Gunderson was compromised somewhere along the way. And I tend to kind of believe that, especially towards the end of his career before he passed away. You see him starting to attend UFO conventions, which are notorious for being glowy and spooky. So, um, yeah, it's just kind of very interesting. But him shacking up with a McMartin parent and her account of how he was kind of a womanizer, um, was very aggressive with her. I think is incredibly strange. Like, why are you shacking up with a McMartin parent? Also, this is also very kind of interesting. At when Ted Gunderson was in Las Vegas, um, he was a private investigator. He had his own private investigating firm. Well, at the same time in Las Vegas, um, he was working with regularly Michael Aquino's second wife, who was also a private investigator in Las Vegas. So, you know, was she still connected to Michael? I don't know, but these are all things, in my opinion, that just raise question. Um, to know exactly what he was doing, like I said, I don't think we're ever going to know. Um, but the very fact that he was FBI at one point, um, and very, very high level FBI, not just like a field agent. He was in charge of certain field offices in entire regions. So, and the FBI is rather well known for, infiltrating organizations and kind of fed jacketing them. So,
Yeah, I mean, so with Ted started at the FBI in 51 and went for almost 30 years. He was a senior special agent in charge, Los Angeles, California, when he retired. He previously had been the special agent in charge of Memphis, Tennessee, and Dallas, Texas from 73 to 77. From 73 on, he was like a chief inspector, and for 8 years, he was in New Haven, Connecticut, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as the special agent in charge. And for 5 years in the 60s, he was a special agent supervisor at FBI headquarters in D.C. So that's his own resume, which appears at the front of this McMartin scientific report, which is attached to the front of the archaeological investigation of the McMartin Preschool site in Manhattan Beach, California. So I'm not familiar with Gunderson having the tendency to sleep with um, the mother. That didn't come up. And my admittedly cursory overview of this. Do you remember the mom's name?
I actually texted somebody who would know the name, so I'll have that in just a moment. Um, but one thing I did want to explain is the disinformation agent and like what that means. Um, Now, whether he knew, it's okay. So the name is Jackie McGauley, Jackie. McGauley is McGauley. Um, so, what a disinformation agent is, now they can be used as a disinformation agent with their knowledge or without their knowledge. But what it means is that they release largely true information. So that's not to say that nothing that he released is bad information. But what a disinformation agent will do will release, say, out of the 100% of information they release, they'll release anywhere between 5 and 10% bad information. And this is done so as the analogy I like to use is anyone that's ever navigated a map. If you are anywhere between 1 to 5 degrees off your intended target, that eventually down the road leads to some wild relocations of where you're going to end up. So, it's kind of it's a way to be able to hide their ability, there meaning the feds, or social engineers, kind of whatever term you would like to use, but it's kind of a way for them to take the opposite route, because typically what happens is they put forth a narrative such as I think this was seen with like the Charlie Kirk stuff, where you see an official narrative that comes out like this is what happened and everything, and when the public starts not believing that, then they come out and then just start rapid firing a bunch of false narratives really quickly to kind of muddy the waters, because that's the whole point of disinformation. Disinformation being the intentional spreading of false information to deceive. So that's what I mean about Ted Gunderson being a disinformation agent. I tend to believe that whether he was in on it or not, I don't think really matters. Okay, it does matter a little bit, but we're never going to get the straight answer to that. I don't think that there's a document somewhere that says Ted Gunderson was a disinformation agent. I just don't think that exists, and if it did, it doesn't now. But the point is I think a lot of the information that he was being fed at some point was just that information that would lead astray. Now the FBI would be able to easily fake documents, would be able to even fake witnesses, like all sorts of stuff. But once again, disclaimer, that doesn't mean that the information he released, like all of it was bad. So it's the point of bringing this up and bringing into the discussion the character of who we're discussing is important, just to keep things in perspective, because this is a very huge network. This is a very large underworld that they want nobody finding, or if it's found, they want to make sure that the waters are so muddied that anyone that points it out is discredited by, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're panicking, you're panicked, this is satanic panic, stop panicking, Goel. you know
I'm a very panicky guy, as everyone knows. Um, I have two speeds, and you're seeing one of them. The other one is mildly aggravated, which is it usually occurs in traffic
right,
or when I'm
right.
dealing with one of my nephews. No, I mean disinformation is part of it, and what you talk about, like this kind of subculture, what I call the cottage industry, um, satanic ritual abuse, or just conspiracy theories in general. And right now, conspiracy theorists are having a pretty damn good run at the moment.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's like 100 no,
yeah, with the Epstein files and everything else, you're starting to see. You would think Alex Jones would be really happy right now because he's been proven right, but he seems to be absolutely miserable
right.
at the moment.
Another
Because
potential disinformation agent, I personally
yeah,
believe.
I, I hated Alex Jones. I mean, he used to drive this huge armored vehicle in downtown Austin with loudspeakers on it,
Right. Yeah,
and
I think video of him doing that.
yeah, he would be screaming. He'd be trying to like have a coffee or something, just chilling out on your day off, and here comes Alex in his big armored personnel carrier, whatever the hell that thing was. It was like a Hummer on steroids.
Right, right.
And here's Alex Jones screeching into his loudspeaker, "There's a war for your mind." And it's just like the New World Order.
Right.
It's just all of this stuff that he would, screech autistically. I am autistic, so I could say that.
Right.
Um, One of the things that Alex would do, like over and over and over again, he would be just adjacent enough to the truth to come across as completely credible, but also self deprecating enough and wild enough in his delivery
Right.
to be easily dismissed. And of course, he sells his little water filters and his alpha male, whatever supplements and things. That he's made quite a good living out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge anybody making a living, but it is part of the cottage industry of this. Um,
Right.
my wife wants me to sell like merch on IRA, particularly like logo merch because I get a lot of compliments for this bespoke ball cap that I made,
Yeah.
um, with the IRA logo on it, and it is captioned "This machine kills Satanists." And
I like it.
whenever I wear it out in public, it's one of one.
Yeah.
Whenever I wear it out in public, people ask me, where can I get one of those? And my wife thinks that I should sell merch, and I'm just like, nah, it just makes me feel nasty. But
Right.
it doesn't make a lot of people in the cottage industry feel nasty. And then of course, years ago when I worked for a political action committee in a consulting firm, one of the people that I worked with, um, Tea Party consultant, told me I should go to these conferences and be a paid speaker. And they went on like a 5 city tour of South Carolina with me when we were trying to primary Lindsey Graham. And I was never down for that. It's always kind of given me the ick,
Right.
the cottage industry with this. And to those who occupy that space and make a merchandise of it, that's fine. That's your choice. My personal choice is to go the other direction.
Right.
Um, like my
I
hair's
can
on
never
fire.
I can never hate a man for trying to make a dollar, as long as it's honest. Um, that's
Yeah.
usually my thing. But I do agree. I think, and I kind of toss this around with my show as well. Because one thing I like to do, I've had a couple of survivors on my show. Um, having discussing SRA or just mind control, and one reason I like to do it is because when we talk about these subjects, it's kind of easy to dehumanize them, and because it's so cartoonishly evil, and it's really kind of easy to disconnect like the fact that we are actually discussing real people who had real lives, they had families, and this was actually kind of brought to my attention. I had an interview with a woman, Dr. Carol Lieberman. It's probably the most interesting interview I've ever done. Um, she was a wonderful person. Not really a good fit for my show, but I am very glad I did it because in the very beginning, the intro to my show has a lot of video clips of like Dr. Jolly West and MK Ultra stuff, and she actually studied under Jolly West at UCLA,
Hmm.
and she had no clue that he was involved in MK Ultra. Um, and
She
she
had to be
she
the
was
most
like,
oblivious human being on the planet, or she's lying.
"Well, go watch the interview and tell me which one." But um, it just kind of reminded me also that not everyone is going to hate that man. You know, some people are going to have an entirely different perspective of who he is versus, say, people like us who will do research into this stuff and then realize the horrific things that he did um, in his work. And I just like reminding people, which is why I have the survivors on my show, why that these are real people. These are people with families. They are people with real lives. They've experienced some of the most horrific crimes I think I could ever depict. Um, and it is, I think it's just kind of important. But on the note of merch with that, um, I kind of went back and forth because, I sell some mind control merch. And, I ultimately decided that I was going to sell some merch for my show largely because I want to be able to fund it and keep going because pretty much all money that I make goes into everything I do. So, you know,
Yeah, it's donations. Like that's always been fun for me because when I get a few
right,
$100 from somebody, it automatically goes to Pacer
right,
or Exchange or some site like that for court records.
right.
And then I just gleefully uncover things that I'm not supposed to be able
Right,
to uncover.
right,
And then it's just this joyous sprint to investigations and ritualabuse.com to upload it all.
right.
And that's always fun when you get a few $100 to spend on, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the
Big fan.
subscriber revenue, that sort of thing.
Right,
But no, I mean, I understand why people do it. Even if it's not to plow back into the work or the content or whatever.
right,
I understand why people do it. I just personally don't do it myself for the reasons I articulated, which it just
right,
feels icky to me. Um, I have thought about doing it for the nonprofit that I kind of ascended my way into being the executive director of because my wife was, burned out.
right.
So Relentless Hope, she was the executive director and founder of that organization.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And then she got burned out and she looked at me and said, I don't want it to die.
Right,
Um, but I can't do it anymore. And I wound up taking over. And I have thought about doing merch and diverting the revenue to that. We got some substantial donations at the end of last year. So we went from about 15 grand in the bank to about 50.
right,
And that was lovely because it's $150 an hour for a lot of the services like EMDR, neural feedback, uh,
right,
counseling, and we have a lot of counselors and therapists who cut our clients a deal because a lot of our clients, um, they're victims of pretty horrific abuse, and they don't have the means to afford the services that they need.
right.
Um, I have thought about doing merch for that, but I don't know how much the board of Relentless Hope would approve of the merch that I would do.
Right.
So that's a discussion I'll have with them at some point. But if you've watched my content, especially the mock advertisements I do,
Oh, yeah. Love them.
uh, I tend to be you know, a real shitster and
Oh, that's one
provocateur.
of the reasons I enjoy you and the content you create.
Yeah, so I make fun of things quite a bit because I believe sunlight and mockery are the best disinfectants.
100%.
So it's basically where we're at there in terms of like IRA's approach to this. Is if I can't take you down directly, I'll make fun of you until you just feel really uncomfortable and
No, I
but
agree
I
with
mean you're
that.
raping kids, like what do
Right.
you want me to do?
Right,
like
and I think that's an appropriate response is mockery.
yeah,
Um,
especially in a
it's
state like Utah where you're probably not gonna secure any convictions because they have a
right,
2.97% conviction rate for rape.
right,
They're just abysmal. They under 12% in terms of or 12, 13% depending on the year. prosecution rates. And my
The
most
fact that
recent,
there's any state worse than that is,
yeah,
hair raising to me, because that's
uh,
right. That is abysmal.
the United States in general is abysmal on the issue of sexual abuse.
Right.
Um, and there isn't any innocent explanation for it. Um, the reason you have a conviction rate that low is because you have to try to have a conviction rate that low. And the other
Right.
side of it is like our government is occupied by people who want to sabotage it in order to break it down and rebuild it according to their ideological persuasion. They're not interested in a working or functioning government,
Right.
which is why the conviction rate for like homicide in this country is around 48%.
Right.
And that is, it's not even a conviction rate, it's a closure rate. So if it's closed by an arrest or a conviction, they count it in that
Hmm.
48%, which means that if you
That's
murder somebody, you
interesting.
have a better than 1 in 2%, 1 in 2 chance of getting away with it.
Right.
Um, so we're starting to see more and more people wake up to the fact that their government doesn't work, and that's a deliberate fact of
Right.
life that it's not engineered to work, and the people who run it aren't interested in delivering a functioning product.
Right.
Um, they're interested in making it work less well in order to tweak it according to their ideological persuasion, the way they think things ought to be.
Right.
And so that's kind of, I think, what happened in this case that we're talking about today.
I completely agree. I think that's actually the explanation for satanic panic in general.
Yeah.
Um, I really do think the whole satanic panic, which it's become, or which it is now uh, known colloquially. Um, I think it really was just, well, I think it was a lot of things. I think it was a cover up of a lot
Mhm.
of these crimes. Um, it was misdirection. I think it was a way to explain away a lot of terrible abuses under the MK Ultra program and subsequent. Um,
Iterations of that program.
right, right. Because for anyone who doesn't know, for anyone who is programmed or mind controlled, brainwashed, whatever term, um, what's interesting is you have to continually program people, otherwise the programming breaks down. And when the programming breaks down, that's when you start getting memories coming back. And when this happens, or it starts to happen, say if somebody is programmed when they're a child, um, they will start having memories around the age of 30, because the programming has broken down enough to where, say, if they have multiple personality disorder or DID, dissociative identity disorder, um, their alters are breaking down enough, their altered personalities are breaking down enough to where memories are flooding back and forth in between all of them. And people can start remembering some of the abuses that happened to them, which is, I think, what we started seeing in the 80s, because you go back, 30 years before that, and we are literally in the height of mind control and behavior modification programs. Um, and this is not to mention all the programs we don't know about. Because I mean, largely the fact that we even know about MK Ultra is kind of a fluke. It was a
Mhm.
complete accident, and I think it was just like they were so quick to destroy all the documents that they just overlooked all the financial documents, which is why we know about it. But so I do think it's kind of a cover up of a lot of this as well. But also it's a way to protect pedophiles, um, which is what we've seen, because we start seeing the development in the 90s of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which had, people like Jolly West on the board and Dr. Elizabeth Loftus and some of these people that were directly involved in MK Ultra. Or we have people such as um, Ralph Underwager, who is a very well known and well documented pedophile. And I mean, he even said that the abuse of little girls was, quote, God's way or God's will, I believe. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's the most insane statement I've ever heard, but yet
Oh
he's
no,
on the board.
this is, I mean, for those of us who know, here's the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. First off, it's not a syndrome. It's not in the DSM. It's not recognized by the American Psychological Association. And it was founded by Peter and Pamela Freyd after their daughter accused them of sexually abusing her. And Peter Freyd was a University of Pennsylvania Ivy League mathematics professor. And so he put forth this notion that any recovered memory of childhood trauma were often false or implanted by therapists. And so, of course, he coined the term false memory syndrome in 92. He then wound up building an organization, a 501c3 for that operated from like 1993 until 2019 when it dissolved because guess what? Uh, Multiple people on its board, multiple people associated with it kept getting busted for sexually abusing children or trying to rationalize the abuse of
Right.
children.
Well, and
And
imagine
so,
they couldn't find anyone to take that over.
yes,
Imagine.
I mean, it was mind boggling to me to see like some of the quotes that people came out with. So if you were to look at some of the citations, um, is if you look at some of the things like Debbie Nathan, um, she said the kids involved in this hysteria have indeed suffered, but not at the hands of their teachers. She was referencing the McMartin case. Compared with the abuses of a child protection movement gone mad, that is, the people who were opposed to this, could incest be any worse? Of course, it couldn't be any worse to be like have your father or your mother sexually objectifying you and sexually abusing you. It couldn't be worse than say these Puritans who were opposing the idea of institutionalized incest or pedophilia.
Right.
Um, so what I would say to people is do false accusations of sexual abuse occur? Yes, absolutely, but they are few and far between.
Right.
And what I've always said is if you have an allegation of sexual abuse, it needs to be corroborated with physical evidence. That's why it's so important for rape victims and so important for parents of child sexual abuse victims to get those kids in for full scope medical exams, to get in for a rape kit as soon as possible after your sexual assault, so
Right.
that corroborating physical evidence can be collected and documented for later criminal prosecutions and civil suits. I've
Right.
always said you need not just the allegation, but corroborating physical evidence. And so as we
Right.
look into the McMartin case, I want to go over like the timeline really quickly. So in 1983, I believe in May 1983, a woman brings in her son to a Manhattan Beach daycare slash preschool known as the McMartin Preschool. And it was operated by a mother and a son, last name McMartin, Virginia McMartin, and her son Ray. Um, and of course, her son Ray, I think, was named Bucky or whatever.
Bucky. Ray Bucky.
Bucky, Ray Bucky. And basically, they had operated the preschool without incident. And around August of that year, 1983, the mother took her son in for, a routine checkup, and there was blood on his anus. And there's just not a lot of good innocent explanations for why you're
Right.
preschool age son would have blood on his anus, and this quickly metastasized into hundreds of children, alleging that Virginia McMartin and her son and other teachers, I think it was 7 teachers total at that preschool,
Correct.
had
Most of
sexual.
which were family
Yes,
of the Bucky family.
it was a family owned business and a family operated business. So most of the people who worked there were related to Virginia McMartin and her son. And so the children began to draw pictures of the abuse, and I'm going to bring that up here. This is some of the pictures that they drew. You should see that coming up here in just a moment. It should be up in the upper right or left hand corner of my screen. To give you an idea, this is what 4 to 6 year old children were drawing in terms of like what happened to them. So they're trying to communicate in their cognition at their level of development as a child what occurred. And universally, they talked about tunnels being under the preschool. And a lot of what they said strained credulity. Now, when this was taken into law enforcement, um, there was physical evidence that these kids were sexually abused. Obviously, blood on a child's anus is a pretty damn good indicator that something is amiss. Now, that's not to say that there can't be another explanation for it, but the fact that these children were all largely telling the same story about the abuse is corroborative of the veracity of the allegations overall. They're all talking about tunnels underneath the preschool. They're all talking about things of that. So in 84, um, March 22nd, 1984, the LA County District Attorney began to hold a press conference in which he outlined this these allegations of abuse um, at a Manhattan Beach preschool, the McMartin preschool. And the allegations span sexual assault, pornographic exploitation. They were recording and photographing the abuse. And of course, they were terrorizing these children. And so you have the investigators and the parents who believe it enough. They believe these allegations enough to bring a prosecution for it. That is not something that prosecutors typically do if they don't have evidence. And
Correct.
because they're investing a significant amount of time and money into this. And of course, it's taxpayer funds. And then, of course, there's also the fact that district attorneys are elected officials and their political futures are at stake if they bring charges that aren't substantiated by evidence. So, of course, um, the first trial ends in mistrials. One of the things that stands out about the record from that first case is that the district attorney and the police did not go dig up the McMartin preschool, which the building code at the time required a 4-inch slab. The McMartin's preschool had a 49-inch concrete slab underneath as its foundation.
Correct. And actually so the prosecution actually went in, or not the prosecution, the defense went in and actually performed their own archaeological survey,
Mm-hmm.
but they did it on the plot next to the preschool, not even the preschool itself, and somehow got away with that.
Yeah, so they were uncontested introducing evidence um, related to an adjoining plot, not the preschool itself. And for reasons that I think we can all speculate, the prosecution did not rebut that. The prosecution did not do its own archaeological survey of this site. So, of course, the first trial ends with a hung jury. It's a mistrial. The second trial, Manhattan DA clearly believes in these allegations enough to bring a second prosecution against Ray Bucky. Um, that ends in 1990. And then, of course, the parents who are fed up with the fact that the County of Los Angeles, either at the sheriff's level or at Manhattan Beach's local police department, so on and so forth, whoever had jurisdiction, all of these competing agencies failed to conduct their own archaeological surveys. So they retained the services of a man, a UCLA professor named E. Gary Stickle, PhD, who was on the faculty at UCLA. This is not a crank. E. Gary Stickle begins to do an archaeological excavation of the McMartin preschool site that is now possible because the site has changed ownership. And so the new owner agrees to let the parents conduct this excavation with E. Gary Stickle in, if they want, as long as they do it before he demolishes the preschool. And what do they find, Jacob?
They find the tunnels,
They find the tunnels. And
along with everything else to corroborate this as well, along with over 200 animal bones, children's clothing, backpacks. There were pentagrams painted on the floor of this place. There was very prominently featured a plate with a pentagram, not only etched but hand painted on top of the etching into it. Of which there was some expert. It's here in my notes somewhere. The expert stated that it was such a perfect pentagram that a child wouldn't have had the dexterity to be able to perform such, uh, like perfection in this. Which I agree. I don't think the average age of the children would have been able to perform the etching and or painting of that plate.
so up in the upper right hand corner of my screen, you can see the plate that they pulled from this excavation with the hand painted pentagram. And of course, it's a subjective opinion as to whether or not a child could have drawn that. But honestly, there's a 5 pointed star. It's not in a circle, but it is hand painted on a plate. And in the context of the allegations here, um, there's not a lot of good explanations for why this was pulled from an archaeological excavation of the McMartin preschool site.
That's correct.
And so as we get into this, um, one of the things that we begin to uncover is the fact that there are multiple things pulled out of that site. They find the tunnels, and in a rather staggering 184 plus page report, um, E. Gary Stickle writes up his findings. And those findings are corroborative of what the children say. So here's the prosecutors. This is what E. Gary Stickle um, writes about the prosecutors. Prosecutors, forced to a showdown by the parents' insistence, commissioned a superficial search of open terrain and, without going under the concrete floor of the preschool, branded the tunnel stories as bogus. Now, understand the significance here. If the tunnel stories are bogus, then everything that these children are saying is called into question in terms of their credibility. So we've lost Jacob. It looks like we've. Here we go. Jacob's back.
Yeah, it said conveniently enough that the page crashed. So
Yeah.
isn't that interesting? But yes, I am back.
Esoteric Studies has joined us in the comments and has waved hi, so we're going to politely say hi before we move on. But at any rate, the prosecutors were forced into a showdown by the parents insisting that the tunnels were real and they wanted to have an excavation during these two trials. The prosecutors they did a superficial search of the open terrain, according to E. Gary Stickle, and without going under the concrete floor of the preschool, branded the tunnel stories as bogus. Now, in doing so, they basically torpedoed the credibility of their own witnesses, these children who are making these allegations. If they were saying that the tunnel story was bogus, that calls into question the credibility of the allegations themselves. Why would a prosecutor do that to their own case? I think we can all guess. But at the end of the day, um, what you start to see is Debbie Nathan, who's a journalist who now kind of functions as what's her name, Brandy Zadrozny of NBC News. She's the one that they trot out now, along with Elizabeth Loftus back in the 90s. She's still around too, to discredit any allegations such as these. And here's what Debbie Nathan says: the McMartin School was painstakingly probed for tunnels. No, it was not. None were
No,
found.
no, it was not.
The McMartin parents have invested years believing in demonic conspiracies and underground nursery tunnels. Until recently, the parents were still digging. They came up with Indian artifacts. Well, when they professionally excavated this site and they went under the 49-inch slab at the McMartin preschool, what did they find? They found the tunnels that the children said were there in the locations that the children said those tunnels were present. And
Correct.
this is the same woman who said, compared with the abuse these children have suffered at the hands of the people who believe them, the people who are zealots in this so-called satanic panic, could incest really be any worse? That's an exact quote. That's one of the things that she said. Could incest be worse than having a bunch of adults believe children when they say we were sexually molested in tunnels underneath this daycare? That's the
That's
level that we're dealing with here.
right.
And so it should be important to know once and for all whether children describe actual tunnels or imaginary voids. Journalists should know whether the parents found any artifacts or something more telling. That is Dr. Stickles' opening here. And what do they find? They do a ground penetrating radar survey that is corroborative of the kids' allegations when they start doing the dig. Um, Once the McMartin preschool switches ownership and the new owner gives them permission to go through and under the slab, they find the tunnels that the children were talking about. And they find that the tunnels that someone tried to cover this up by filling in the tunnels and so on and so forth. And of course, the problem with that is there's disparity between the native soil and the soil that you use to fill it in. So it's very clear
Correct.
that what you did. Then, of course, you didn't get rid of all of the evidence, including a Disney bag that was copyrighted in what, 1983?
Correct.
Um, and this Disney bag is present in the tunnel. It is a child's lunch bag, basically. It's copyrighted 1983. And when was the McMartin preschool built? When was the foundation poured, Jacob?
That I'm actually not sure of. That's one of the few details I don't have.
It's in the 60s. The 60s.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
how does a Disney bag from the 80s get underneath a 49-inch slab in the 80s if there isn't a subterranean tunnel consistent with what these children are saying. And so what we're seeing here is corroborative evidence of what these children say. But by then, there has been an acquittal in addition to a mistrial. And this case has been relegated to the realm of the satanic panic and conspiracy theories.
That is correct. And to kind of put this into perspective, um, this wasn't just a handful of children. And in fact, uh, to add just a little bit more context, there was more than just McMartin that came up in this. The harsh reality is that the McMartin preschool, in conjunction with at least two other Manhattan Beach preschools and one babysitting service, was the center of a very large child prostitution and child pornography ring whose operations appear to have been protected and covered up by a number of local, state, and federal officials. So we are talking about the number of children actually ended up being closer to 400 children. And just with, or it was an astounding 460 children reported being sexually abused at the three closely linked Manhattan Beach schools. Even more astounding, investigative author Michael Newton, among others, has noted that Children's Institute International determined a full 80% of all 460 children displayed physical symptoms, including vaginal and rectal scarring, anal bleeding, painful bowel movements, and the anal wick reflex associated with violent penetration.
Hmm. Yeah, but it's all a conspiracy theory. There's
Just a
no evidence to
conspiracy theory.
there's no evidence to corroborate any of this.
Right.
It's just bullshit.
And what's even more interesting is that the stories told by the victims and witnesses were remarkably similar to the nature of abuse in general, but the locations where the abuse took place and the perpetrators of the abuse. And these were not, as commonly believed, only preschool children telling such stories. Some of the witnesses were former students in their teens and 20s, which their stories corroborated those of the children. The older witnesses were actually not allowed to testify at the McMartin trials. However, or largely due to the statute of limitations for the crimes committed against them had expired. But many of the younger witnesses were also unable to offer testimony as well for various reasons, most notably because they were too severely traumatized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, imagine that. Imagine
Right,
being too severely traumatized by anal rape to testify at a child rape trial.
right.
You
And
know, I just don't
here's
understand how
what's
these kids don't get over it.
right, right. They should just be able to talk about it freely, even though it just barely happened to them. And what's interesting about this is most, if not, I believe all of the uh, children who are now adults still tell the same stories. They've never changed their stories, and at least the ones that are still openly talking about it. Many, some have moved on because they have largely determined that they're not going to receive justice in this.
No. And the truth is, thanks to the joys of double jeopardy, the statutes of limitations, which were abysmally small back then, um, in the state of Utah, where I've been working on the Hamlin case for the last 40 years, the statute of limitations up until 2018 was, 4 years after your 18th birthday. So if you were sexually abused as a child, you had 4 years to sue after your 18th birthday. And what you talked about with like memories not appearing until age 30, or even if you remembered, like having the courage or the wherewithal to talk about it coherently. As someone who interviews ritual abuse survivors on a regular basis, one of the things that you'll notice, and clinicians can attest to this, people who are victims advocates can attest to this, is how these people are scrambled cognitively, to the point
Correct.
where they come across, they jump from topic to topic. It's very hard to get a coherent, linear narrative of their abuse from them because they're not fully integrated. They're not fully healed. And they're basically processing their trauma, and that comes out in how they communicate the realities of that trauma because they're unable to talk like a normal person or communicate
Correct.
like a normal person because they're not a normal person, thanks to the fact that during their formative years, when their cognitive faculties were developing and their communicative faculties were developing, their language
Correct.
processing skills were developing, um, they were being horrifically sexually and physically and mentally and emotionally tortured by people.
That's
And
correct.
that's the reality of it is, why do we have a statute of limitations for rape at all of any
Yeah.
sort, for sexual assault
Yeah. Right.
of any sort at all? And why are perpetrators able to claim an expectation, a legal expectation, that, hey, beyond this 4 years or this, 8 years or this 10 years or this 12 years or this 20 years, however long the case may be, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, beyond that, I should be scot free.
Right.
Well, your victims are never free of this. They receive a life sentence. I said it before, and I'll say it again, and a lot of people think that I'm extreme for this position. There's one cure for pedophilia. There's one cure for sexual predators in general, and that cure is execution. It's capital punishment.
100%. I could not agree more with that.
Like,
There is no rehabilitation for these people.
no, there's not a single documented case in the literature of a pedophile or a rapist rehabilitating or stopping at one.
Correct.
Um, there just isn't. There's no empirical basis for that whatsoever. And what you're seeing that's really petrifying is an attempt to normalize pedophilia. They're now trying to introduce the term minor attracted persons and treat it like an orientation. Like it's
Right.
just
And
it's an immutable
there's the
characteristic of your identity, like your
yeah,
skin color
right.
or your handedness, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, so on and so forth, or
Right.
ambidextrous. These are things that are just fundamental to who you are.
Right. And they shouldn't be persecuted because of that. And
Yes.
I find that despicable, absolutely deplorable. And I there's even an argument, the minor or non-offending minor attracted person is like the newest, like, distinction is
The virtuous pedophile, as they used to be called.
right. Exactly. So, I've never acted out my fantasies. It's just that I have these fantasies and I need help. And it's like, yeah, you need help stepping in front of a firing squad. But
Mm-hmm.
um, you know,
You've never acted out those fantasies in real life in terms
yeah,
of
yet.
sexually abusing a child yet, but you
Mm,
have acted them out. And this is the other thing, like,
right.
even pedophiles who haven't crossed that bar into actually physically raping a child are viewing child sexual abuse material and thereby creating a demand for that material in the first place, which in
Correct.
turn creates a demand for the production of that material and the distribution of that material. And the production always involves the victimization of a child.
Correct.
Like,
Um, there was something I wanted to point out. I think this is a really important aspect to this, as far as the excavation that was commissioned by the parents at McMartin. So, in fact, 30 days before Nathan's article appeared, this is actually a an article that came out. Actually, the article doesn't really matter to what I'm about to mention. The tunnels were discovered beneath the preschool by scientists hired by the parents, which we have established, confirming the testimony of the children. Now, this is what's most important to know about this. The project employed a team of archaeologists from local universities 2 geologists, a professional excavator, and a carbon dating specialist and a professional photographer to document the dig's progress and findings. So it's not like the parents were actually there, or most of them were there during this, and they were helping. But the people leading the charge in this archaeological dig were highly esteemed professionals. These are not just, call the white pages and Jerry with a backhoe. You know, these are very like they're very professional, top men in their respected fields. So, this is a big deal that these people not only signed on to do this, agreed to do this. Many of them, uh, paying money out of their own pockets to do it. Um, but they know exactly what they're talking about. Like I said, this isn't just Jerry out of the white pages.
Yeah, they write a 200-page report documenting their findings and the scientific
Correct.
validity of those findings. At the end of the day, all of this could have and should have been done by the LA County District Attorney's Office
Correct.
and law enforcement within Los Angeles County, and it wasn't.
Yeah, the very fact that the parents, once again, between all, so 3 facilities, 1 babysitting service, and there were 460 students or children that were ultimately, and I think it actually ended up, by the end of it, it was closer to 500 um, of all of these parents actually had to pay out of their pocket for this. Um,
And
and
they did.
then, right. And then by the time that the report was done and everything, the court rejected to bring it in as evidence, which
Mm-hmm.
is insane. I mean, if that's not evidence of a cover up right there, the very fact that they were able to review the evidence and the court turns around and said, nah, nah, that's inadmissible.
Mm-hmm. Whereas the defense's tentative excavation of an adjoining lot was admissible in one of the trials.
Correct.
Um, and so as we look at the totality of the McMartin Preschool's case, what we see are 7 people, 7 perpetrators who they got away with it. They got away with what they allegedly did. And in a fair system of justice, those parents, by the way, paid good tax dollars for law enforcement and prosecutors to do their job. And then they got taxed a second time on the back end by having to fund this excavation themselves when the McMartin Preschool changed ownership. If there's one good thing that came out of this, it's that Ray Bucky and his mother, Virginia McMartin, were no longer able to run a preschool. They were
Correct.
no longer able to access children. And of course, the media has made them into martyrs. The facts make them into abusers
Correct.
because this is corroborative in its entirety of what these children were saying. Those tunnels are located where they said they were located. They are exactly what those children described. And we're talking about children not just in the 80s who were actively attending these preschools, but children dating back 2 decades or more, who named the same perpetrators, the same families, the same institutions in their abuse. And they were barred from testifying. So at the end of the day, there's a ton of evidence that should have convicted Ray Bucky and his mother and the others beyond a reasonable doubt. However, the Los Angeles County District Attorney did not do his job, and neither did law enforcement in terms of excavating this location. They did not want to do the due diligence
Correct.
necessary to prove up these charges. They wanted to look like they were doing something about this without actually doing anything.
And it actually gets a lot worse than that as well. So, At least 3 dozen suspects who had been independently identified by numerous witnesses were never indicted at all. One of these men was a man named Robert Winkler, who was arrested in neighboring Torrance, California, and charged with running a babysitting service out of the Cocoa Palms Motel. Yeah, that's where I'm taking my kids, obviously. Uh, the Cocoa Palms Motel that authorities described as a front for a sexual abuse ring. Children in the McMartin case recognized Winkler in news footage as the man they had known as the Wolf Man. The kids described Winkler as being a frequent visitor to the school who oftentimes delivered drugs for use in abusive rituals, which were sometimes conducted in churches, a cemetery, and a crematorium. The Wolfman, conveniently enough, turned up dead on the eve of his trial, allegedly of a drug overdose, which is
Imagine
a
that.
yeah, isn't that convenient? Wrinkler was not the only one to miss his day in court in conjunction with the McMartin case. Judy Johnson, the very first McMartin parent to lodge a complaint, never delivered her scheduled testimony. Her body was found sprawled naked on the floor of her home. Her death said to be due to complications from her chronic alcoholism. She wasn't an alcoholic, that was one of the biggest problems. Uh, I mean, I guess maybe by technical standards she would have, but she wasn't a drinker. Even her personal friends and family said that she wasn't an alcoholic where it would have ever caused her death. Before her death, she was regularly derided by defense attorneys and their media allies as a deranged crank, which is a direct quote. In truth, Johnson was not known to have any mental problems or a drinking problem. Before learning of the unthinkable abuse of her child, the abuse her child had suffered, considered a key prosecution witness, Johnson received frequent threats before her death, and she was followed when she ventured out in public. Many of the other McMartin parents were openly skeptical of Johnson's stated cause of death. And this is just one of many as well. Like this is a very
Imagine if the
common
woman would
thing,
have a substance abuse problem after finding
right?
out that her kid was repeatedly molested.
Right,
Imagine,
and
I can't imagine why a mom would drink to excess in that situation.
right,
But the problem is, you got all these other hundreds of parents who didn't drink to excess, who were backing their kids and the overall narrative of these allegations. And so
right,
it's not just these parents and Stickle and others associated with this archaeological excavation of the McMartin site. It's people like Dr. Roland C. Summit, who published an article called The Dark Tunnels of McMartin in the Journal of Psychohistory's spring 1994 edition. And I want to read some of the closing paragraphs of that article. People magazine sent a reporter to interview Dr. Stickle. She reported to headquarters a remarkable misunderstanding that the project found nothing. Hearing this, I called Dr. Stickle, who was dumbfounded. Quote, I told her the children said there were tunnels and we found tunnels. It was as simple as that. End quote. With some inside pressure, the magazine researched a more definitive appraisal of the project, but it was bumped by more urgent priorities of space, perhaps by an unexpected celebrity marriage or divorce. So the damage was done. This reporter reported the exact opposite of what Dr. Stickle told her. This is his exact quote. I told her the children said there were tunnels and we found tunnels. It was as simple as that. Somehow, that reporter then goes back to People magazine and says, the project found nothing. I, you know, it's the remarkable misunderstanding that wording. There's no misunderstanding here. There's deliberate misrepresentation.
Correct.
And so on the Maury Povich show on June 21st, 1993, Dr. Stickle, Jackie McCauley, that is the woman whose credit cards and everything were maxed out by Ted Gunderson, who was sleeping with her for 3 years. So another parent and two now adolescent McMartin children, they were brought face to face with debunking authors Paul and Shirley Eberly and defense attorney Danny Davis for the Maury Povich show. In response to all of the complicated and sometimes explosive arguments that erupted during that hour, Mr. Povich met Dr. Stickle's description of the tunnels with the perfect dismissal. So he concedes that the tunnels were found. But here's his quote. Here's Maury Povich's quote. What are we saying? Any hard evidence that abuse took place in these tunnels? Well, before, the tunnels didn't exist. And of course, the fact that the defendants or someone tried to fill in those tunnels would have destroyed a lot of physical evidence of the abuse in question. So at the end of the day, the mainstream media did its job. Maury Povich, husband of Connie Chung of CBS News, did his job. He was a tabloid journalist and he ran a tabloid talk show. Even if the tunnels existed, what are we saying? Is there any hard evidence that abuse took place in these tunnels? Yes.
The
Testimony
fact that
of
the tunnels
hundreds,
exist.
the fact that the tunnels exist, and of course, the physical evidence of abuse in these children, including, what was it, Jacob? Problems with their rectums,
Correct. There was
vaginal
all
scarring.
correct. There was all sorts of problems, such as once again a full 80% of over 460 children linked between three locations and the babysitting service, all linked together because they were linked to the McMartin and Bucky family, which is how they were linked. A full 80% displayed physical symptoms, including vaginal or rectal scarring, anal bleeding, painful bowel movements, and the anal wick reflex associated with violent penetration.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
to mention the STDs that kept popping up as well.
yeah,
Uh, exactly how a 4 or 5 year old ends up with an STD without being sexually abused, you know, try and riddle me that.
yeah. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And for those watching out there who are still skeptical about this, where the hell do you think all of this child pornography comes from?
Right.
Like, it's someone who has access to a child first off, and it's not some isolated instance. There are terabytes worth of that stuff
Oh
circulating
yeah.
around the dark web and even the above ground web. Um, and I used to work in content review for a contractor for Google. And these people send this stuff over Gmail for God's sakes.
Yeah. It's
And
all over Instagram.
yeah, it gets
And
flagged.
Facebook does nothing about it practically.
Yeah, nothing about it is done by Facebook. Nothing about it is done by Facebook subsidiary Instagram. And of course, since X became X instead of Twitter,
Yep.
um, there has been a proliferation of pornography because guess what? I mean, Elon's got to pay those loans somehow when they come
Yep.
due. He's got to pay those credit lines off somehow. And when he initially started to come down on pornography and remove it from the site, user engagement dropped. And so he had to
Correct.
let it back on. And the same thing with Pornhub. It wasn't until Nicholas Kristof at the New York Times. That's the only good thing I have to say about the New York Times. Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times started to highlight the fact that child porn was ubiquitous on Pornhub.
Yeah. It
It,
was like an astounding like 80% or
yeah,
78%. It was absurd.
Pornhub basically told him to go pound sand, just like they told everybody else to pound sand. The Canadian government wasn't doing anything about it. Pornhub is located in Montreal, Quebec. And of course, Bill Ackman, the hedge funder, got angry. when he read the coverage. And he started to press Visa and MasterCard. And since he's a hedge funder who invests in those types of companies, those types of payment processors, guess what? They started to suspend payment processing for Pornhub. And Pornhub magically decided they could get all of that child sexual abuse material off of their website so that they could generate revenue. They could actually process payments for credit cards branded with MasterCard and Visa, um, because you were hitting them in their bottom line.
Yep.
And so it is possible to filter child sexual abuse material out. It is possible to identify it and remove it from your site. They just don't do it. Because if
Right.
they did, and this is one of the more grotesque factors in social media, if it's so ubiquitous and it's such a problem for user engagement to remove that material, that tells you everything you need to know about the type of people who are on Facebook and Twitter or X or Instagram, and why are you letting your children on it? Well, these
Correct.
companies, a substantial portion of their revenue depends on the engagement that they receive from people who consume child sexual abuse material. Are you out of your fucking mind?
Right. And that's not even to include one of the newest problems of AI generated CSAM, you
Yeah.
know, which is like I will never be posting a picture of my child on the internet due to that very issue.
Yeah, I mean the
Um,
recent revelations about Life Touch being owned by Leon Black,
right.
who paid Jeffrey Epstein almost what $175 million for
Yeah.
quote unquote tax advice.
Mhm.
Um, I don't care how much money you're worth. There's no
Yeah.
tax advice
And
that
I
worth
don't
that
care
much.
I don't care what, advice you have about taxes, it's also not worth that much. Um, one
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to also bring to attention, as far as some of these, suspicious deaths surrounding a lot of the prosecution and the parents and everything is also a former Hermosa Beach police officer named Paul Bun or Binion Bin Bin Binnum. I'm not sure.
Bynum,
Yeah,
Bynum, yeah.
Bynum, who had been hired by the parents of the victims as a private investigator, turned up dead on the eve of his scheduled testimony as well. His death by gunshot was ruled a suicide.
Oh
Convenient.
yeah.
Uh, though those close uh, uh, to the man dispute this finding. Among other things, he may have testified about the examination of the tunnel excavation project conducted at the school site. And this was, of course, the object of uh, much argumentation by the media. The fact that the children repeatedly told stories of the tunnels under the property by which they could be secretly transported to and from the school, and in which they were subjected to horrific abuse in a secret room, was frequently cited as proof that the children's stories were fabrications. It was universally accepted that the tunnels did not actually exist, that being the consensus view of the media and law enforcement authorities. Uh, Nevertheless, while it is true that the investigation commissioned by the district attorney's office found no evidence of the tunnels, another investigation ignored by the media certainly did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Paul
So,
Bynum, he was a defense investigator, and so he had testified about the defense's excavation and the shells of dead turtles that they found at the adjacent lot rather than under the preschool. So once he delivers this apparently exculpatory testimony, he is shot dead. It's ruled a suicide. And of course, it's lost to history in terms of whether or not he'll ever be successfully impeached at a future trial, because the original trial ends in a mistrial. There's a second trial or second round of charges that's bought against Ray Bucky, and he's prosecuted second time. He's acquitted the second time. Um, and of course, a lot of this is because the testimony of older victims is not admissible. It's because the corroborative archaeological excavation funded by the parents is ruled inadmissible by the judge in the second trial. And so you have a situation where here's Judy Johnson. She sees blood on her infant's diaper and she takes him into the doctor to find out what the issue is, like any good parent would do. And she is derided as a crank, as a crackpot, as an alcoholic. She eventually dies. A lot of people don't believe that she died of her alcoholism, but that's the official cause, just like Paul Bynum's official cause of death is suicide. And again, as you said, there's a good many suspicious deaths around this. But what I want to drive home to our viewers, if you think this is about Virginia McMartin and her son and her family, Ray Bucky, you're out of your mind. Just like the Epstein case isn't about Jeffrey Epstein.
Correct.
It's about all of the people that Epstein was providing child sexual abuse material to, children for sexual abuse, and apparently murder and cannibalism. If you read um, those files have resulted in a pretty extraordinary event this past week where Bill Maher asked, where does QAnon go for an apology?
Right.
You
Which
know,
I find kind of interesting.
because
You
it's
know,
become so indisputably awful. Like when you read those files, even a cursory overview of those files, there's no innocent explanation for any of that. There's no
correct.
innocent explanation for having a door that drops down the sea in Little St. James. There's no innocent explanation for purchasing barrels of acid to be delivered after the FBI opens its investigation, its second criminal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein for sex trafficking. There's an invoice that we've all seen floating around the internet where he orders multiple barrels of acid to be delivered to his island. And apparently, in all of the files, it's the only such invoice. So it wasn't something that he regularly ordered to Little St. James or any of his other properties, which belies any innocent explanation for why he was
Right.
ordering that.
Right.
The
I
fact
mean,
that it's
barrels.
yes, the
You know,
fact that
that's absurd.
it directly overlaps with the opening of the second criminal investigation uh, for his sex trafficking and sexual abuse allegations by the FBI. Um, I think the timing is more than suspicious, and of course, the files that have been released, as bad as they are, can you imagine what they've hidden?
Right. Right.
Um,
I mean, this is what they're willing to admit to. So yeah, I agree. The things in which they were unwilling to share with the public for whatever reason, um, I guarantee is something of a level of evil that most people are not willing or ready to be able to comprehend.
no, I mean,
I mean, this is already hitting people like a freight train with the
talking about
reality
an
of some of
infant's
this.
intestines tasting like cream cheese, for God's sakes.
Right.
Um, uh, it's a level. I mean, it makes you gag to read it. Yeah, I've been doing this
Most
kind of work
certainly.
for 25 years, and it's every time I think I've hit a new low or bottom in terms of the material
Right.
that I'm reading or reviewing, Somehow these people manage to punch out a new subfloor or new sub basement.
They
It's
really do,
just
don't
like,
they?
what the hell are you doing? This
Right.
is not anything that a normal person would ever be involved in. But of course, we knew that. I mean, we've seen them.
Right.
There's no innocent explanation for Chrissy Teigen's tweets about children.
Right. Or
Uh,
Rainn Wilson.
yeah, Rainn
There was over a
Wilson's tweets.
hundred tweets referencing pizza or some other coded language. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, most of us, when we talk about pizza, we talk about where we're getting our pizza from. I mean, my wife's a huge fan of Via 313. I'm more of a Mountain Mike's guy here in Utah.
right,
We talk about where we get our pizza, and then these people clearly are talking in code about pizza, and it's very
right,
clear they're not talking about pizza. They're talking about um, something else. And if you understand that pizza is code for pedophiles, referencing children, if you understand all of the other code words that we've all become way too familiar with over the past 5 to 10 years,
right.
um, it's very clear that these people have significant issues. And it's just inexcusable. Um, and I think it's hard for the average person who has enjoyed Dwight Schrute on The Office in
Right,
his hijinks with Jim and Pam and others. It's very hard for them to link Dwight Schrute to Rainn Wilson tweeting about this. The same thing with James Gunn. James Gunn, like you would think this is a guy who's made some of my favorite movies over the past 10 years. And he just does not seem to be that type of person. But to be fair, Virginia McMartin and her son, Ray Buckey, didn't appear to be
right.
those types of people
You
in
look at
the
Miss
80s.
McMartin, she looks like any other, like your standard grandma, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's she looks like she could be literally anyone's grandma. And Ray Buckey, I mean, there's nothing extraordinary about him, you know? It's uh, I
Other
think
than
this
the
is
fact
what
that he's a man at a daycare, a
right,
preschool.
right. Um, and the fact, like, not even just, a standard teacher or, helper or whatever, but he was, like, involved in the thick of it, in the thick of
Mm.
operations and getting parents there and stuff, and yeah, I'm definitely always a little concerned seeing a man at a daycare. Like, I mean,
In general, you'd be concerned seeing a man at any working with that age group,
right,
outside of the context of being a PE teacher in an elementary school or something like that.
right.
You
Well,
know,
and, you
seeing
know
kids, seeing male educators, below the middle school or high school level,
right,
I think is there's your sign. I
right,
don't. I mean, full disclosure, I started out my first year teaching fifth grade, and it
right,
was a great age group. I had a great experience, but one of the things that I noticed is how many teachers um, are creeps.
right,
Over the 3 years that I initially taught school, I refused to measure a girl's hemline or like how far away her skirt was from her knee. You couldn't pay me enough to do that.
right.
Um, and they don't pay teachers enough as it is, but you really could, like, even if my salary had been triple or quadrupled, I was not doing that. And there were other teachers, it
Sure had
seemed to
no
be,
problem doing it.
yeah, it was their shtick, and they would obsess over what kids were doing outside of school.
Yep.
Um, we all know that teenagers are horny little psychopaths, but so
Right.
what? We've all been teenagers. We know what that's like.
Right.
But it really is none of your business what they're doing outside of school. That's their parents' business. Um, if you see something when you're out and about in the community that you shouldn't be seeing, it's entirely appropriate to alert their parents and let their parents deal with it.
Right.
Um, I wouldn't be alone in a classroom with a female student nowadays. You can't be alone in a classroom with a male student.
Right.
Um, you can't be alone, period, with a
Right.
student because there's just so much going on. I mean, every time you go on Google, there's another teacher having sex with a student, a child,
Right.
and there's just no good explanation for it. I mean, back in the day, this was a problem even back in the early 2000s when I was teaching. Like the impropriety there, and it was something like my students knew that I would physically oppose. There was a male social study teacher that I worked with, and he was a single man, unmarried, in his 30s, with a male roommate. And the first time I saw him, I didn't like him. First time I met him, I had a problem with him. Something about his demeanor was off.
Right.
I don't like unmasculine men in general. Whether they're straight or gay or whatever, I don't like it. I don't like
Right.
men who don't act like men. And
I,
he was
I second that. I'm also
he's
very comfortable around these people.
yeah, like he was somebody I did not want to be around. And if I had had a child, I would not want my child to be in his class.
Right.
And several kids came to me and told me that he had told them that they could come over to his house and play video games on the weekends,
Oh God.
and that
No.
they didn't need to talk to their parents about it first.
Oh.
And so they were telling me about it, and universally, they all had one thing in common: they were all from divorced families. They
Isn't
all
that
had single
convenient?
mothers. And so I went up there, and I'm 225 with an 8% body fat at that point.
Right.
Like I worked out 6 days a week, and I was not happy. I already didn't like him, and I went up there and said a few things that perhaps I should not have said to another coworker. Uh, but as I put it to him, if you want to go up to the administrator's office and talk about what you did, you can report me.
Right.
But if you ever talk to any of those kids about this kind of stuff again, or if you retaliate against any of those kids, or you make them uncomfortable in any way, like I'll lose my job, and I'm stupid. I don't care about prison or jail.
Right. Right.
Like it's this is a hill I'm willing to die on. And those kids never had any issue with him again. And that was something I wouldn't let the boys say stuff to the girls. I didn't write it off as just boys being boys. Like if you came into my
Right.
classroom, the first 10 minutes, you were to get your journals out, write. The next 20 minutes, we're going to be the lesson. And then, of course, we're going to have the actual assignment. You're going to pick up your homework folders. You know, you're going to take your homework home that reinforces concepts we went over in class. Everything is structured. You're in there for 55 minutes. For those 55 minutes, you bust your ass. There's no room for you to screw around.
Right.
Um, like certain topics I wouldn't have conversations with my students about. Like I told them, you could talk to me about the subject. You can talk to me about the Denver Broncos, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Auburn Tigers, the Indiana Pacers. You can talk to me about Barcelona soccer, but you can't talk to me about anything else because it's none of my business. And
Right.
it's really none of yours.
You
And
know, some of this, the denial. that people have towards specifically the preschools. Um, whether it's men or women, because both men and women have been implicated in this satanic preschool hoax, I believe is what Wikipedia calls it.
Hmm.
Um, it's to me is absurd, obviously on so many levels, but my number one question always is where do you think pedophiles are going to go? Like, where do you think they're going to be? They're going to be where the children are. So
Yeah.
it's just like Boy Scouts or anything else. You're going to find them in the children programs, like the not all of these guys are, uh geniuses, but they're not all, idiots either.
No, you're
And
spending kid time with kids, and you're a man, and those kids aren't related to you. Um,
right,
and you're trying to be alone with them. There's your
right.
sign. Like it's not your
When it
place,
seems to
man.
be the same thing with some women at this point too, because
Yeah,
it is coming out more and more, like you had mentioned. There's more teachers getting wrapped up in this stuff than ever before. Um,
yeah,
and I don't think it's happening more than it actually ever has. I think it's just being highlighted more.
yeah. We used to
Um,
think that 9 out of every 10 like child sexual abusers were male.
right,
We didn't scrutinize women because we thought of them as the fairer sex, and that they're just not going to do this. And it
right,
turns out they are doing it.
right,
And this whole notion that women are equal to men is probably more true than we like to admit in this context. And,
right,
you know, I used to look at it from a standpoint of, in most sexual abuse cases I ever looked at, from an investigative standpoint, like the investigative research I did for private clients, the issue was that there's a dominant male figure and the female is going along to get along with him. It's
right,
usually he hooks up with a single mother and she's financially dependent on him. She also has some sort of psychological validation that comes from being with him, and
right,
therefore she's willing to deliver up her own children. And this was consistent with the Cinderella effect, which is the effect in sociology and psychology, where um, the number one indicator of childhood sexual abuse or childhood abuse, period, the number one predictor is the presence of a non biological parental or guardian figure in the home.
correct.
And so, Cinderella, obviously, we all know the story. The wicked stepmother and her stepsisters tormenting her and everything because, on a biological level, we human beings don't feel the same way towards their non-biological children that they feel towards their biological children. It,
Right,
that's just the reality. There's a difference, and it's the same way like male lions when they depose the leader of a pride, they kill all of the cubs, so that the females will go into heat.
right,
That's the entire point of them taking over the pride is to pass on their genetic line. And so what you see is a situation where, for better or for worse, the human animal isn't much different from these other animals, especially when the human animal isn't shaped or structured by morality.
right,
And that is, they don't have a strong moral code that comes from religious observance or religious affiliation. It- so a lot of us are restrained from that kind of behavior because we have core beliefs and values that arise from our religious observance and our religious affiliation that shape and limit our behavior. And thank God for that. Whatever you
right,
want to say about religion, at the end of the day, it is generally a force for good in most people's lives. It gives them structure, it gives them meaning, and most importantly, it curbs their behavior
right,
to where they don't do things that they should not do.
right. Yeah, I think a lot definitely can be a lot of negative can be said about religion, but obviously we see what the results of a nation that has for better or for lack of a better term destroyed the faith in Christianity, what that has led to in this nation. And
You see
whether
what happens when people are just paying lip service to it as opposed to actually trying to
right,
implement it.
right,
Like,
right.
you
It's
know,
it's incredibly disturbing where a society will turn to when this happens. Um, and when our modern society, especially after these Epstein releases, when a modern society looks even worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, I mean, we've got some major problems.
yeah, we have some major cultural problems, and I think the lack of reaction to the Epstein files.
Right.
Um, Honestly, when I read it, I have a hard time like physically restraining myself.
Same.
Uh,
Same.
it's like these people are grotesque, and I think we've all been conditioned to believe that rulers are a terror to evil works as opposed to good works. And what we've seen
Right.
over the course of the release of these files is that rulers enable evil works for the purposes of intelligence and national security, or whatever the case may be. That's the window dressing that they use for
Right.
this. But at the end of the day, kids are off limits, women are off limits, and there's a line, man. Like you
Right.
cannot. There's certain things you cannot do. I have no problem with men knuckling up and whipping each other's asses or even killing each other. I don't have any. That's the way dudes, my friends and I, beat the hell out of each other coming up.
Right.
And then we went and got a Dr. Pepper.
Right.
Like we got it out of our system. Whatever beef we had, we squashed it. We caught a fade, and that was it.
Right.
And it was over. That's just the male dynamic. And you have these people who don't want men to be men, and as a result of that, the lines have been blurred to where these men aren't being men because a real man does not do this.
Right.
Like a man who has a sense of himself, who knows who he is, who's confident in who he does not touch women and children
Right.
in this way. Like I won't lift a hand to my wife. I'll barely raise my voice to her. Um, and it's my prior two wives. Like I yelled at the second one once, and immediately apologized because it's wrong. Like you should
Right.
not, as a man, give someone else control over your reaction. You should not give a situation control over your reaction.
Right.
That's just basic manhood 101. And what
Right.
you're seeing in these files are a bunch of men who clearly did not have that value system instilled in them by their parents, who clearly did not have that value system reinforced by any sort of moral code or belief, and clearly are so far removed from the rest of us that they cannot be allowed to
Right.
walk around the rest of us.
Right.
There are
Well, and
limits.
I think that's part of this. Um, you know, it always disturbs me when I see like Bill Gates or anyone at that level, particularly that level of wealth, try to explain what's best for humanity, or what's best for the world or whatever. And it's like, how would you know? You are literally surrounded by yes men, and you live in a world where when you first started getting wealth, I'm sure you indulged in whatever vices you had. But then I think there comes a certain point where, because you live in a world where literally money is no object, which means you have access to anything, then your vices at a certain point are no longer going to give you the same,
There's
you know,
nothing
the
more dangerous than a nerd with money. Like that's the biggest issue. I think we froze you up again. You dropped on us, but No, as I said, like the issue is there's nothing more dangerous than a nerd with money. A
Yes,
dude
I
who
would
his
agree.
entire life has never accomplished anything, never had any basis for confidence or anything. And if you look at people like Zuckerberg or Gates or even Jobs, they stole the idea that would become their product.
Right,
Like the UI for the GUI and whatnot for Microsoft and Apple, it was stolen from somebody else.
right. Well, and
Uh,
Gates employed like mafia style tactics to get it. You
yeah,
know, he
Zuckerberg,
is a very dangerous man.
he stole um Zuckerberg stole the idea for Facebook from people who had hired him.
Right,
We all know them as the Winklevi or the Winklevoss twins.
right,
At the end of the day, what one of the things that this highlights is that there's a certain class of people in our society, and we think of them as elites, whose mores and norms are so far removed from ours. We all know
right,
thou shalt not steal. You don't take what isn't yours under any circumstances. You don't steal. Like at the end of the day, if you do, you're a thief.
right,
And you should be able to profit from stealing from other people. But these people operate in this rarefied air, in this strata where they can steal and lie and cheat and kill with impunity.
right,
And that has to change. I think William F. Buckley said it best. Indifference in things minor carries over into things major. And
right,
the reason conservatism, I may not be conservative temperamentally, but in terms of ideology, yes. Like William F. Buckley defined a conservative as someone who is like standing athwart history and yelling, stop.
right,
And as the older I get, the more I'm just like, okay, stop. We can't have
right,
this shit. Like, we can't have what we're seeing unfold in the streets of our cities, in our communities. We
right,
can't see what quite frankly, public discourse, political discourse, since I've been alive, has just gone in the toilet.
right,
And we keep electing dumber and dumber and dumber people.
right. And
And
that's even scarier because these people are intentionally searching power for the sake of power, and then they're dumb on top of that. And then for, some magical reason, they're able to make hundreds of millions of dollars in their position, a position that, relatively speaking, does not make a whole lot of money. Um, you know,
$178,000 a year, I believe, at last count, last time
right,
I checked.
right. And they
At the
walk
end of the
out
day,
multiple millionaires,
yeah,
hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like
because they can
these are
insider trade
dangerous
with
people.
impunity.
Right.
And on top of
Exactly.
it, they can access credit lines to invest and everything that an ordinary person doesn't have.
Right.
The other side of it is as someone who's done opposition research for political campaigns, there isn't a single politician or political candidate that I've ever looked at that isn't compromised financially or sexually or some other way.
Right.
And the reason they get elected is because they are compromised financially or sexually, and because as a result, they're malleable to the people who put them there. You got less than 2% of the population who funds our election campaigns with their political
Right.
donations. You can go on opensecrets.org and find that
Right.
out for yourself. And it's under 2 million people in this country who fund those campaigns. You think that your little $10, your $25 is a big deal, but reality of it is the people who fund like $200 and up make up less than 2.2 million out of a country of over 300 million.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
it is what it is.
360 million officially, and
Yeah.
plus another 40 to 80 illegal immigrants.
Yeah, so you're looking at a situation where a select minority in this country put people into office with their campaign donations and keep them there,
Right.
and you don't have a reelection rate that dips below 75% in either house of Congress, really.
I
Like
guess
every
this
two
was
years.
one reason why I was never why, cuz I ran for office twice, and I guess this is, one reason why I didn't win.
Well, you just weren't deviant enough.
Right.
And as a
Right.
result, you weren't compromised enough to blackmail or be malleable in
Right.
terms of like what you would tolerate. You weren't one
Right.
of these people who procured children from the likes of Virginia McMartin and Ray Buckey
Right.
and Jeffrey Epstein. Um, you weren't one of those people.
Right.
And until you are one of those people, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right. And I mean,
Uh,
I was labeled an extremist in the local paper because I would have positions such as abolish government schools, all gun laws are an infringement, these sorts of positions, and it was not, well, it actually was a lot popular than I was actually initially expecting. I had tons of support, but yeah, it's being up on Capitol here in the state of
Hill.
Utah. Yeah,
Uh,
it was peeking behind the curtains to see how the sausage is made. It was incredibly disturbing. So,
yeah. I mean, it's one of the issues is like if you've ever talked to a kid who was a product of public education, especially lately, um, why wouldn't you want to abolish public schools?
right. I
I
mean,
mean, they're
they
just
are
glorified
brainwashing
daycare.
camps.
They're
Right.
just glorified daycares in which children are being indoctrinated. I mean, the kid can't read, write, or do basic math, but they can't tell you that Black Lives Matter and that love is love and love wins and all. They can
They can tell
spout
you
whatever
what
slogan.
their pronouns are.
Yeah.
And that this is
Can't
actually
correctly
the
use pronouns, but they can tell you what their pronouns are.
right, exactly. This was actually one of the handful of reasons I actually walked away from being a Satanist was actually the trans movement. Um, Especially because you know Satanists, less so the Church of Satan, even though they're still kind of involved, mainly like the Satanic Temple. Man, they fully embrace the trans movement with open arms, and I just couldn't square that circle because it's child experimentation. That's what it is, and I'm not a huge proponent of the pharmaceutical industries to begin with. I was always kind of punk rock, into metal shows and stuff, and I just couldn't deal with that. And
Once
looking
they
at
once they figured out how to monetize transgenderism, that was when they started
oh
aiming it
right,
at kids because the
right,
hormones cost money, the surgeries cost money,
right,
the psychiatric treatment costs money, and of course, you get them on the front end because you're transitioning them, and then when they detransition on the back end, or they're a shit show in their adulthood, you get them on the back end
right,
because there's a medication for that too.
right. Well, and
Um,
you basically create permanent customers to the pharmaceutical industry.
mhm. I
So,
mean, that's
I
what
mean, it's
transgenderism
ideal
is.
for them.
It has nothing to do with the autonomy or the liberty of a trans person, which, I mean, they're just
Right,
basically a gender dysphoria patient. They're not
right,
trans. They're a
right,
gender dysphoria patient who suffers under the delusion that they're in the wrong body.
right.
Gender is a
Which is
social
a mental
construct.
disorder. You
Yeah,
know
that's what gender dysphoria is. It's a mental disorder. It always has been. It always will be.
right,
And at the end of the day, once they figured out how to monetize disorder by catering to it and That's why they got on board.
Right.
There's more money in screwing these people up worse and permanently mutilating them, and then of course treating the consequences after the fact, than there is in treating them and helping them become normal. The
Right.
vast majority of like gender dysphoria patients will eventually just realize they're
Yeah, they
gay.
grow out of it.
Yeah, they're just gay.
Mhm.
They're homosexual or bisexual. They'll grow out of it. They will accept the body that they're in, and the ones that remain that are persistent into their adulthood, they deserve compassion. They deserve treatment as
100%.
mentally ill people.
Correct.
Um, that
We
that's
we
all
don't
there
we
is to
don't
it.
allow them to dictate the way in which society runs or the way in which schools run, politics run. We don't give the
Yeah,
keys to the kingdom to a mentally ill person and then label that compassion.
yeah.
That's insane. That is an insane,
Allow a
sick
mentally ill
society.
person to mutilate themselves and whatnot,
Right,
and act like it's perfectly normal. Oh, it's their body, their choice.
right.
Oh no, it really isn't.
Right,
This is permanent mutilation,
right,
and it's a temporary situation that they're going to grow out of. They're going to eventually realize, okay, I was going through something. And of
right,
course, as someone who's had a lot of gay and trans friends, um, I have never been friends with a gay person or a transgender person who did not eventually self disclose that they were abused as a child.
right,
Every single 100% of them have been sexually abused as a child in their
right,
formative years. They've been physically abused, they've been mentally abused. A lot of them come from single parent households, especially single mother households.
right. Usually a
What
household
George,
that has drug issues, alcohol
yeah,
issues. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
it's,
very, very common story. I mean,
yeah,
I'm with you. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head that I have not heard the same type of story from.
hmm
As far as gay, trans, bi, whatever, it's always the same or a similar type story.
yeah. So, I mean, if you look at these people when they grow up, and, I mean, Kanye West is a good example. I mean, he clearly is unhinged. Has been
Right,
unhinged for a while, and a lot of his mental issues have been exacerbated by chronic drug use.
right,
But then it comes out that he was involved in a sexual relationship with his cousin, a same-sex relationship with his cousin, with
right,
same-sex conduct in his formative years, his adolescence, and this went on for years. And then you see what he is now. I mean, Kanye West, he grew up in a single-parent household
right.
with a single mother. He did not have a healthy example of masculinity to learn from. His fathers are so important in that respect, and father figures are so important in that respect, especially young men, because, no matter what you want to say, a woman cannot show you how to be a man. She can show you how to be a
100%.
woman, but she
Right.
cannot show you how to be a man. And, a lot of women are going to get upset about that. A lot of
Oh,
single
well.
mother sons are going to get upset about that. But at the end of the day, do I give a shit? No, I don't.
Right. Well, it's the
Truth,
truth.
the truth is what it is. I mean, we
Right,
talk about all of these things in the context of this dismissive attitude people have towards these dysfunctions and this abuse, whether they want to call it satanic panic or false memories, whatever they want to invalidate it because it conflicts with their worldview, and that's reality
correct.
conflicts with their worldview. None of this is compatible to social order or to a decent life.
Yeah. A
And
healthy
so,
society, anything. I mean, there's a very famous video, or I don't know if I'd say famous, but it's a very popular video that's uh, I see it, cycling on social media every now and then, and it was a pedophile discussing how he would target
Yeah.
uh, his
The
victims, and it
father
was
was
always
dangerous. He wouldn't.
right, exactly, the father that would be dangerous, or if there was a father in the household. And I always just find that incredibly interesting. And there's, I've now started seeing certain social media influencers talking about, well, and I think Jordan Peterson kind of popularized this, that fathers need to be dangerous. Like
Mhm.
that's something that men need to be. We need to be, you know, even killed, but capable of great violence if necessary.
Yes, you at
And
least need to have the capacity to be
right,
violent and to carry yourself in such a way as to be a deterrent to potential threats to your wife and your children,
right,
your family, not just your wife and you, but your community. If you have strong men in a community, that community does not have these kinds of social ills.
right. Well, in a strong community, one in which people also know each other, we're able to kind of point to people that might be a problem within the community. And that's, I think, another reason why we see this destruction of community. Um, and it's kind of interesting too, because I've always, noticed it's the women that make the community, or at least build the community. The sewing circles, the women are the ones that make the play date with the kids, and they're the ones that talk to the neighbors and stuff. And guys kind of do it too, but the main driving force
The
are
men make the community, the women make the community, but the men secure it. Why do
right,
you think those women are able to make play dates
right,
and do sewing? It's because their men are working and providing. And what we've done in
right,
our economy is construct a situation where women have to work outside of the home to
right,
maintain economic equilibrium. And
right.
I know that from personal experience. I've been married 3 times. My current wife, who will be my last wife, she doesn't work outside of the home. I pay
Right,
every bill. And
right,
we have a harmonious relationship because she gets to stay at home and be in her feminine energy. She doesn't have to do anything masculine. She doesn't have to be
right,
stressed out about bills. She doesn't know what a bill is.
right,
And that's not because I'm rich or anything else. It's just because that's the structure that we set up. If you put a woman under stress, she does not handle it the way a man
right.
does. And
Well,
the reason
they're
my
not
wife,
designed to. They're not meant to. God never intended women to be able to handle that level of
yeah,
stress.
so the reason my wife can create a community for us where we go to Bible studies and whatnot is because she's at home and she's able to socialize with people and she's able to schedule things and she's not worried about like her work obligations or anything
Right,
else. She knows that I get off at 5:30 every day at the latest. I'm going to be home at 6 and from 5:30 to 9 o'clock at night, that's her time. And
right,
she gets to schedule us for whatever she wants. So if she wants us to go out on a couple's date, or she wants us to go to a Bible study, or she wants us to go to some sort of civic event that is within the wheelhouse of that community you're talking about, she can do that. In
right,
fact, that's her sole focus.
right,
Like, you know, what we now have is a situation where women have to be men. And in turn, they expect men to be women. It
right.
does not work. Like,
It's a quick
ladies,
destruction of society to be able to do so. And, I largely blame feminism for this. Um,
no,
you
I
know,
blame men.
well, yeah,
I blame men not being men and not just sitting there and pumping the brakes on this and saying, you know what? I hear what you're saying in terms of like you want something else or something more
right,
than being a wife and a mother. And the reason you want that is because I don't make enough money.
right.
I don't work hard enough, and I let my society get out of control to the point where the economics became so deleterious to you being a woman and me being a man. I let this happen. My father let
Right.
this happen. My grandfather let this happen. At the end of the day, the reason you feel insecure financially and you feel like you need to work outside of the home and make money, um, is because I let things go. I wasn't on my job. I didn't put a stop to this shit. Whether it was globalism or liberalized immigration policy or inflationary monetary policy, I didn't. As a man, I didn't sit there and say, "Okay, I know why you're doing this," and it is to destroy what works so
Right.
that you can enslave the rest of us.
Right.
And I'm not letting you do this. If I have to, I'm gonna get physical about it. You
Right.
want to get it popping, we can get it popping. So all you plutocrats rats and everything, this is the thing that like nowadays men are so castrated that even all of the stuff that's coming out in the Epstein files, men aren't out in the streets breaking stuff
Right.
and going after these people, which is what a man should be doing in this situation. Like we
Right.
should
Well,
all
I mean,
be
there's
pissed off
definitely no repercussion. There's no consequence
because you keep
to
waiting for the
public
courts to do it.
servants. Right.
You keep waiting for your leaders to do it. Your leaders aren't your leaders.
Well, they're
Your
public
leaders,
servants.
they're not public servants. They serve the shareholder class and the donor class, which are one and the same thing. The people who put them into that office,
Right.
that's who they serve. And the people who keep them there,
Right.
their idea of power is getting reelected. But at the end of the
Exactly.
day, they're still a donor's bitch. And
A
that's
hundred
who they've
percent.
been running interference for with these Epstein files and everything else, um, are these donors. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she had her wake up call because Donald Trump called her over her support for the release of the Epstein files and said a lot of my friends are going to get hurt. And
Right.
it's like, well, your friends are raping and torturing and murdering children. They
Yeah.
should
I
get
kind of
hurt.
don't care about your friends.
They
You know?
should get hurt. Those are just natural
Right.
consequences that come from raping and murdering children.
Right. I mean, even with this Pam Bondi uh, testifying in front of Congress recently, she made the comment that if we prosecuted everyone in the Epstein files, then society would collapse. I don't actually
Well,
believe that it would collapse, but
her big
if
rebuttal in
that
that hearing was, the Dow is over 50,000. That's what we should be
right,
talking about. It's like, are
yeah,
you out of
that's
your
what's
mind?
important. Yeah, right. That's
Like, have you
insane.
lost your damn mind?
That
Nobody
is
gives a shit
insane.
about the Dow being over 50,000. First off, the stock market is no longer a barometer of my economic health.
Right.
The
That
majority of,
decoupled a long time ago.
yeah, the majority of that decoupled from the average person's economic health because 90% of the publicly traded shares are owned by they're owned by 10% of the people.
Right.
Like, so
Well,
this
and it's
idea that publicly traded companies and their performance are a barometer of economic health is just bullshit.
yeah, she's literally just telling us, like, "Look how well we're doing." That's what we should be talking about. Look how well the top 10% of the country are doing. That's important. Fuck your grocery bill. Like,
And fuck the fact that these poor white trash girls in Palm Beach were being
mhm.
trafficked
Yep.
by
That doesn't
wealthy
matter.
men. It
Yep.
doesn't matter because I mean, what are they anyway? They're a bunch of shiksas who they're poor. They don't matter. Their parents don't matter. And
Right.
if they did matter, something would have already happened.
Right.
It's like, nah, every human being matters. And there are just limits to what you can do to a human being. The reason I say that is because I have a moral code that tells me that all human beings are created in the image of God, Imago Dei. That comes
Right.
directly from my faith. And therefore, whatever you do to a human being is what you do to God. So
Right.
that restrains my behavior. There's a lot of people in traffic every day that have no idea how close they came to dying that day. There's a lot of
it's
people who
it's
drive on
always
oblivious to that, you know.
it's always
But
at a green arrow for me.
yeah,
The green
so
arrows.
they don't have any idea. And the reason they don't have any idea is because I live with my behavior restrained under a belief system that says whatever you do to that person is what you're doing to God. And you don't want to
Right.
disrespect God. Like at the end of the day, that's the limit. I expect my rulers to be a terror to evil works, not to good. And what you're seeing in our society is that rulers are a terror to good works, not to evil. And the people
Correct.
who try to bring this stuff to light, try to expose it, try to do something about it, they're the ones being persecuted. Thomas Massey is under a lot of heat right now. Rokana, same deal. Their reelection is uncertain when it's because of what they've done in spearheading
Right.
this. They should have a lifetime appointment to
Right.
Congress.
Yeah,
You
no
know,
kidding.
they're the ones who spearheaded this. Marjorie Taylor Greene felt the need to resign. She's not running for reelection.
Right.
Lauren Boebert
Which is
probably
a
isn't,
shame.
yeah, too far behind her. A lot of these others who made up the people who voted for the release of these files are facing the same issue. And then, you have Pam Bondi saying none of this stuff matters. Child rape doesn't matter. Child trafficking doesn't matter. Cannibalism doesn't matter. Um,
Right.
None of this matters because the stock market is doing well.
Yeah. So on the matter of faith, there's something I wanted to make sure and read you and your audience. It's actually the first page of chapter 9 out of the Satanic Bible from Anton LaVey. And this chapter is specifically on the choice of a human sacrifice. And I want to see if you can see the double speak that they have. It's being able to speak out of both sides of their mouth. And it says, the supposed purpose in performing the ritual of sacrifice is to throw the energy provided by the blood of the freshly slaughtered victim into the atmosphere of the magical working, thereby intensifying the magician's chance of success. The quote unquote white magician assumes that since blood represents the life force, there is no better way to appease the gods or demons than to represent them with sustainable quantities of it. Combine this rationale with the fact that a dying creature is expending an overabundance of adrenal and other biochemical energies, and you have what appears to be an unbeatable combination. The white magician, wary of the consequences involved in the killing of a human being, naturally utilizes birds or other lower creatures in his ceremonies. It seems these sanctimonious wretches feel no guilt in the taking of a non human life as opposed to a human's. And then to wrap up, it says, the fact of the matter is that the magician is worthy of his name. He will be uninhibited enough to release the necessary force from his own body instead instead of from an unwilling and undeserved victim. And basically, throughout the rest of the chapter, it goes on basically to say that, um, let's see, I think it's right here. Yeah, so the last paragraph of this that I think kind of drives this home is the use of a human sacrifice in a satanic ritual does not imply that the sacrifice is slaughtered, quote, to appease the gods. Symbolically, the victim is destroyed through the working of a hex or curse which in turn leads to physical, mental, or emotional destruction of the sacrifice in ways and means not attributed to the magician. The only time a Satanist would perform a human sacrifice would be if it were to serve a twofold purpose, that being to release the magician's wrath in the throwing of a curse, and more important, to dispose of a totally obnoxious and deserving individual. And so basically, what this is saying is that they are going to be, that they don't sacrifice humans, basically. But then on the other hand, once again, speaking out of both sides of their mouth, saying that they can sacrifice a human if the magician or the Satanist deem the victim to be obnoxious and deserving individual. Um, so I find this all very interesting, because once again, all of this is like you can see in the I think it was Geraldo when Michael Aquino was on. Um, he was actually on a panel with Ted Gunderson, which I find very interesting. But
Yeah.
these are the things that Michael Aquino turns around and says that people are just misinterpreting. They're just misinterpreting these passages. And it's like, no, no, they're not. The people that have used this book to commit horrible crimes understood it perfectly, in my opinion. Um, it's basically, I mean, all Satanism really comes down to a hedonism, and it's a an expression.
Self-indulgent.
Right, exactly. If it feels good, do it. Do what thou wilt. It's the ultimate Aleister Crowley teaching.
Well, it's,
Um,
the Lemic Satanism is actually a little bit different in the sense of do what thou wilt shall be the law. Love is the law. Love under will.
right.
And so it's very concerned with consent. And so if you talk
So
to
they
someone,
say.
yeah, so it's, there's this karmic retribution concept, which is you have to inform someone of what you're doing
Yeah, it's
before
a
you
revelation of
do
the
it.
method.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's much more complex than that in that respect. But at the end of the day, like one of the things that Satanists very much believe is that if you deserve it, you deserve it.
Right,
It's a natural consequence. And what theistic Christians believe, there's no other kind, despite what some people will tell you, um, is thank God we don't all get what we deserve.
right,
Like Christ is the path to not getting what you deserve,
right,
but to getting something that you can never deserve, and that is grace and forgiveness. And like a lot of people don't understand that bifurcation
right,
because one of the things about Christianity is it's been infested with this idea like people are almost gleeful at the idea of someone going to hell.
right,
So they're very satanic in that respect that, this person deserves this. And it's just, well, so do you.
right.
You
It's
know,
the
I,
whole eye for an eye,
yeah.
which
So,
makes the world go blind.
yeah. So at the end of the day, like maybe don't poke somebody's eye out or stab somebody in the eye or do harmful stuff to them so that they don't feel the need to reciprocate.
Right,
And the highest form of morality is refraining from reciprocation and forgiving others their trespasses as God has forgiven you your trespasses.
right,
Like at the end of the day, we all exist under grace to some degree. We're all here because someone restrained themselves and did not retaliate against us for something we did that would have been,
right,
it would have warranted that kind of reciprocity. Like if you want to live in a world under vengeance, you're not going to be alive very long.
right.
Now
Well, and
there are
that's
certain things like this isn't about vengeance. When I talk about reciprocity towards these Epstein perpetrators, this is about having an ordered society. It's about having a functioning society. and you just can't have this shit.
Yeah, there is a justified, um what's the word I'm looking for? Um, there's justified retribution, and I believe that those are one of the crimes in which justified retribution can exist. Um, don't touch children, women, or the elderly, and you know,
Don't touch people who, can't defend themselves. And
right?
children,
It's the level of innocence.
yeah. Now, if a woman sexually abuses a child, that woman should die the same as a man. Like,
100%.
like at the end of the day, if you're a teacher and you're sexually exploiting a child for your own gratification, that's not your job. That's not why you were hired. That is
Right,
not why that kid does not exist to provide you sexual pleasure and gratification.
right,
And he's not in your peer group. She's not in your peer group. They don't exist for that. You have a role and you have a responsibility. And if you're going to pervert that role and that responsibility into a means of exploiting children, you should die. Like ordered
right,
society depends on consequences for actions. And the problem is we don't have consequences for actions. We do like people are free to sexually prey on children, free to exploit and indoctrinate children, and we have no limits to the
right,
degree in which they can do it, especially if those people are wealthy and politically and socially connected, and the children that they're exploiting are quote unquote useless eaters, or they're from a group that people of a certain belief system or ethnicity decree as being subhuman.
right.
Um, at the end of the day, God does not make mistakes. He makes us all in his image. And you do not get to do this kind of stuff to a child of God.
Right.
And the rest of us who want to live in a functioning, orderly society, if you want to do that, there's a price to be made, and that is enforcement. And what I'm saying to people watching this, the time has passed for reaction to this. If the government isn't going to do its job and start having trials for these people in perp walks and executions for what they have done, which is an abomination before God, man, it's revolting, then guess what? That government does not need to exist. We need to get rid of the people in government who are covering for it, and we need to set a precedent that no, this is just unacceptable.
Yeah,
And
I would implore people to read the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence again. This I think applies to this very nature. Um, most people are very unfamiliar these days with our founding documents, but particularly go read the passage. It's the second paragraph of the Declaration, and it gives us the right to alter and or abolish um, a government that does not represent the will of the people. And we cannot live in a society where the will of the people is to harm children in the most grotesque ways
yeah,
humanly
this
imaginable.
this should have been dealt with a long time ago,
Absolutely.
and it
Absolutely.
would not have reached this point. And the fact that it hasn't been dealt with is a problem in and of itself. You are fully within your rights when somebody does this to your child, um, or to a child that you are aware of. You are fully within your rights when the government fails to do its job to deal with it yourself.
I
Like,
agree. I couldn't agree anymore.
like this is it is enough. We can't have this shit. Those of us with children, when we hear and see this and it's revolting, like at the end of the day, that wasn't our child that was abused by these men. But at the end of the day, like collectively, it kind of is. Because if you normalize this for other children, you're normalizing it for your child. And in the McMartin preschool case, one of the issues is parents try to do something about it. They were shouted down by their community. They were shouted down by their government. They were shouted down by their media. And the conceits that were expressed were as abominable as the abuse. I mean, when you talk about Debbie Nathan, the
Right.
the quote that I had earlier where she said, having these adults who believe these children is more abusive than incest. That's a rough paraphrase of what she said. No, it isn't. Like, what?
Yeah,
Have you
there's
lost your mind?
I have a quote from her. She wrote an article called "What McMartin Started: The Ritual Abuse Hoax," and it was in the Village Voice, June 12th, 1990. And she said in this article that she wrote that children at McMartin told of being molested in tunnels under the school. None were ever found, but until recently, parents were still digging. Uh, I mean, so one thing I think is kind of important also to mention is exactly what was found here. Um, so what they did find, just to kind of give a description to this, um, what they found was the longest tunnel was 6 feet beneath the preschool, running eastward 45 feet from the southwest wall and 10 feet along the north wall. The tunnel walls were held in place by support beams and a roof of plywood and tar paper. A branch of the tunnel led to a 9-foot chamber, or the secret room described by the children. Another extended away from the preschool to the triplex next door, surfacing beneath a rollaway bathtub. Forensics tests on thousands of objects found at the site, including 200 animal bones, were conducted. Until the tunnels were found, the LA Times covered the dig with a smirk. The parents and scientists involved were portrayed as crackpots until the existence of the tunnels were substantiated by experts, at which time the newspaper abruptly stopped reporting the story. The public was left with the false impression that the search had failed. Critics of the excavation pointed out that District Attorney Ira Rainier had already searched for tunnels. At best, this is a half truth. Rainier's team tore up a bit of floor tile, but did not even bother to remove the glue that held it in place. The DA's team, as it happens, dug up the lot next to the preschool, not underneath, which we had mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's page 35 through um I think the mid 50s uh is the description, the scientific description of the excavation of the McMartin preschool site,
Right.
in which they outline what they found. There are pictures of the objects that they dug up. There's a description of the area had been dug up by various persons prior to this formal archaeological investigation. The parents dug there because the children reported that it was the area of the tunnel in the room. And this is where the parents found the possibly inflicted tortoise remains, which discovery forced the district attorney's office to finally conduct their own excavation. Subsequently, the DA's archaeologists dug 5 cluster units immediately next to classroom number 4. So they dug, they just didn't dig enough.
Right.
And the reason was they didn't want to find it. So
Right.
when they talk about what they find beginning on page 52, they begin to talk about the tunnel. The tunnel, so this is on page 54. As we dug past the debris filled opening and deeper under the preschool, we observed that the tunnel went in a sharp angle to the southeast, Continuing on, the feature intercepted Unit 1, the trench-like unit, in classroom number 4 for a top, see figure 20B for a top view of the delineation of the entire tunnel feature. Coming out from under the concrete slab floor and in the open area of the Unit 1 trench, the feature's nature became more clear. That is, the width and direction were not only indicated by an abundance of historic artifacts contained within it, but also the soil color of the fill matrix. That is, they tried to fill it in, was measured at 10-year 3-3, a quite dark brown, which was distinctively darker than the surrounding natural soil matrix, which had a lighter brown color of 10YR 4-3, brown to dark brown. The historic artifacts found packed into the tunnel included sections of borders, wood fragments, a variety of metal objects, an inner tube, and numerous bottles. The latter were analyzed for their possible dates. The average width of the tunnel was greater than 1.0 meter as it extended on the diagonal completely across Unit 1 and under the concrete floor to the western edge of Unit 1. Other artifacts encountered as we were approaching the south end of Unit 1 included TV antenna wire, tin cans, scissors, eyeglasses, exposed films, cinder blocks, etc. They were trying to fill this in with anything that they could. And the tunnel continued. The tunnel feature widened at one point, i.e., 50 centimeters north of the south wall of classroom number 4, to the extent that it appeared less tunnel like and more like a room. Also, at that point, as you said, we found a layer of plywood roofing material along with tar paper and roofing nails. This layer was found at the top of the tunnel fill material. So it is consistent with what these children were saying. Here's the physical evidence. And they
Right.
would not admit this report into evidence,
Right.
even though the people who wrote it were credentialed academics and archaeologists. They
Right.
were
And
people.
it's important to point out this was done way before the end of the trial.
Mhm.
So they had every opportunity to actually bring this in as evidence. It was totally within the scope of time. So um and this is what ends up leading to one of the most absolutely disturbing aspects of all satanic panic stories, in my opinion, and that's the witch hunt narrative. That people are. It's just a witch hunt, Goel. Okay, it's a modern mass hysteria that is directed because these are hysterical Christians that are just you know believing in this medieval version of Satan, right? Like that's all it is. It has nothing to do with actual child abuse. These people are crazy. They're conspiracy theorists, and we're all panicked. We're panicking.
As Maury Povich said when he had to concede that the tunnels did exist in
Right.
1993 on one of his episodes, he said, well, is there any hard evidence that abuse actually occurred in the tunnels? I don't know. Maybe the medical exams where 80% of these kids had
Right.
physical evidence of being abused sexually. Maybe the
Right.
fact that the tunnels exist in corroboration of what these children were alleging.
Right.
Maybe all of this. And so what we have is a situation where it's like, no matter what evidence you bring forward, it's still a panic, it's still a hysteria. And if you think this was about protecting Virginia McMartin and Ray Buckey, uh, and others who worked at that preschool and other preschools in the surrounding area in Manhattan Beach, you're out of your mind. This was about
Right.
protecting people in the community who were abusing these kids with impunity. Like that's who this was about protecting. Just like the stonewalling and obfuscation around the Epstein files wasn't about protecting Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right.
It was about protecting the people that they served.
Right. Which is entirely transparent, in my opinion. Um, so in the early 90s, the mass hysteria premise was touted by big city newspapers and magazines of elite stature, all attempting to persuade with evident bias and inflated expert opinion. The false child abuse charges were endemic. The or this school of disinformation coaxed public opinion with dire um, extortions of a child abuse witch hunt. In his Wall Street Journal comments, Dr. Gardner warned of a great wave of hysteria, by far the worst in history, the most devastating, quote, with regard to the number of lives that have been destroyed and families that have been disintegrated. Gardner's basic argument is that allegations of child abuse are often fabricated by parents embroiled in custody disputes. Another explanation not supported by statistics, the one Gardner ignores. One study found that a mere 2% of all abuse allegations stem from visitation and custody disputes. Other researchers have placed the percentage slightly higher. As for mass hysteria, one of the earliest promoters of this thesis was Ralph Underwager, co author with his wife, Holida Wakefield, of a book called Accusations of Child Sexual Abuse. The quote is, few physicians will wish to invest the time and money, $70, to own or even read this book, complained a reviewer of the Journal of the American Medical Association. Quote, it is of little value to those who work with abused children, except as it may be important to be aware of all points of view. The book will be doubt the book will be doubtless be useful to attorneys defending persons accused of sexual abuse of children. It appears to have been written particularly for that audience. The authors cite over 700 references, but they do not really review this body of literature. When a given reference fails to support their viewpoint, they simply misstate the conclusion. Since 1974, Dr. Underwager has been the director of the Institute of Psychological Therapies in Northfield, Minnesota. He has since been frequently called upon to provide expert testimony. In the late 80s, he spent 60 to 70% of his professional life shuttling between courtrooms. He is
Yeah.
the author of numerous articles debunking the credibility of ritual abuse victims. Dr. Underwager has frequently been cited by Debbie Nathan as a leading authority on the subject. Uh, Lisa Manshell, author of Nap Time, an account of the New Jersey ritual abuse case, found that, quote, child sexual abuse was not his field of knowledge, but it was his field of courtroom practice. And just to wrap up on this, he proliferated the opinion that no one knows how to tell accurately whether a child's been abused. Throughout the nation's courts, he has testified in most states and by satellite in foreign countries before at least 200 juries. This is Dr. Underwager was a founder of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, is a ordained Lutheran minister,
Mm-hmm.
and he believes he once said in an interview appearing in an Amsterdam journal for pedophiles,
Padika.
yes, which I believe is actually still around, that sex with children is not only acceptable, but it is God's will, as I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so this is the question that was posed to him by the interviewer. Is choosing pedophilia a responsible choice for the individual? Certainly it is responsible. This is his answer. Certainly it is responsible. What I have been struck by is as I have come to know more about and understand people who choose pedophilia, says it's a choice, is that they let themselves be too much defined by other people. That is usually essentially negative definition. Pedophiles spend a lot of time and energy defending their choice. Imagine that. I don't think a pedophile needs to do that. Pedophiles can boldly and courageously affirm what they choose. They can say that What they want is to find the best way to love. I am also a theologian, and as a theologian, I believe it is God's will that there be closeness and intimacy, unity of the flesh between people. A pedophile can say, this closeness is possible for me within the choices that I've made. Pedophiles are too defensive. They go around saying, you people are out there saying that what I choose is bad, that it's no good. You're putting me in prison and you're doing all these terrible things to me. I have to define my love as being in some way or other illicit. What I think is that pedophiles can make the assertion that the pursuit of intimacy and love is what they choose. With boldness, they can say, I believe that this is in fact part of God's will. They have the right to make these statements for themselves as personal choices. Now, whether or not they can persuade other people that they are right is another matter. Laughs. That
Um,
that's that's on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
right, right. And Underwager insisted that pedophiles, and this is a direct quote from him as well, quote, should attack the concept, the image, the picture of the pedophile as an evil, wicked, and reprehensible exploiter of children, end quote. Following that interview, Underwager was forced to resign as a founding member of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which is largely directed by CIA psychiatrists with backgrounds in mind control experimentation. The London Observer for December 12th, 1993, reported that Dr. Underwager denied ever condoning sex with children. He added, however, that, quote, scientific evidence has demonstrated that, quote, 60% of women sexually abused as children reported that the experience was good for them. He contended the same could be true for boys involved with pedophiles. And
So
this is the
this
man
is
putting forth the witch hunt narrative. So when
yeah.
people deny this stuff, this is who you're siding with. this
Yeah,
this
so
is this is your cheerleader.
this is Ralph Underweger, the same interview. I do believe that it is God's will that we have freedom. I believe that God's will is that we have absolute freedom. No conditions, no contingencies. When the blessed apostle Paul says, all things are lawful for me, he says it not once, but four times. All things are lawful to me. He also adds that not everything works. Halida, I can see you want to say something. That's the interviewer. Do you have a different point of view from Ralph's? This is his wife. I'd add one qualification to what Ralph has just said about there being no conditions or contingencies to the freedom given to us by God. I would add you have to take the consequences of this freedom. That being said, well, I guess I do feel differently about some things. For example, I find it difficult to envision how a pedophile relationship can have the potential of being the type of close, intimate, constantly developing relationship that would be possible in more traditional relationships, whether in heterosexual marriages or committed adult homosexual relationships. Speaking only about men and boys, at least. What I have seen is that once the young man gets to be a certain age, the pedophile is no longer interested in the young man sexually. These relationships start at around age of 11 or 12, and then by 16, 17, the pedophile is ready for a new one. The old relationship is, if not thrust aside, at least radically changed. Because basically, that boy is only an instrument of gratification within a certain
Right.
age range. This,
Right, which even destroys their own narrative because they're trying to say that, you know, these kids are able to consent because they want it. I mean, so even this is destroying their own narrative.
yeah, I mean, it's do pedophiles, this is another part of her remarks. Do pedophiles retain a close, intimate relationship with a boy although the sex ends? Do they then add another boy while keeping the first boy and then later repeat the pattern and add another and just keep adding new boys until they have a whole harem ranging in age from, let's say, 12 to 40? Like, this is this woman's remark. These are the people who are on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation who are advancing this satanic panic narrative, who are saying
Right.
that people who contend for traditional sexual relationships and mores were hysterical.
Right.
Like, it's basically, even though you're no longer sexually gratification or gratifying me or attractive to me, do I keep you around until I have a whole harem ranging in
Right.
age from 12 to 40? I mean, what do you want
Right.
as the boy? Perhaps maybe you want to move beyond this relationship. Perhaps maybe you didn't really want the relationship in the first place and you didn't understand what the hell it was you were getting into, but you were manipulated by an older, wiser, more seasoned individual who was
Right.
using you. You know, these are the things that apparently elude Ralph and his wife, Alita
Right.
Wakefield and Ralph Underwager. I mean, these are things that normal people understand, but they don't. And
Right.
so as I'm sitting there and I'm just like appalled by this, I must have read this interview 1,000 times outside of this episode because it's enraging to me to think
Right.
of like where the false memory syndrome and the satanic panic narrative originated. This is the
Right.
caliber of people advancing this. This is the caliber of people that the media co-signed over the reports of abuse victims.
Right. And
Uh,
so to this day, it is denied that any tunnels ever existed under the McMartin preschool. The denial of the tunnels is necessary to maintain the illusion that the children were not credible witnesses, that illusion being an essential component of the cover up. For if the children were credible, the implications run far deeper than the tunnels under the school. There are for example, the stories told by the children of being pimped out as child prostitutes in private homes and businesses all over the community. They also frequently or spoke frequently of being photographed and videotaped while being abused. The district attorney publicly declared the McMartin preschool to be an elaborate front for a massive child pornography operation. 23 parents filed a civil lawsuit making the very same claim. Other stories told repeatedly by children were even more disturbing. They told of being forced to witness and participate in ritual torture, killing, and mutilation of animals, and on occasion of human babies and children as well. They spoke of being forced to drink blood and eat flesh of the slaughtered corpses, of witnessing the beheading of infants, and of being forced to stab infants themselves. There's a lot more. I'm not going to go into it because, believe it or not, it gets way more graphic than that. Um, so these are children from all walks of life, and yet these stories were soon being told by thousands of other kids across the country as preschool abuse cases spread like wildfire. Um, and it's insane. This goes on to say, how is this possible? If they were all victims of false memory, as they state, how vast a conspiracy would be required for therapists all across the country to implant the very same memories in all of these children? Experts have noted that the victimized children show a level of knowledge that defies rational explanation if the kids have not experienced what they claim to have experienced. For instance, these child victims can accurately describe the look, smell, texture, and color of human body parts,
mm,
all sorts of other terrible things that children don't come up with this. Like, children have an amazing, wonderful imagination. This is not what they imagine.
yeah,
So
it's
they
like
just don't come
it's
up with this.
not only would they not come up with it, they wouldn't come up with it and be accurate unless they had experienced it.
Right.
And so this whole notion that their parents somehow indoctrinated them into this or convinced them that this was going on,
Right.
or that some psychologist convinced them of this, it wouldn't line up with the facts. It wouldn't be
Right.
verifiable that those tunnels existed.
right. And
You
I
wouldn't have
just
a
think
plate
it's
with a pentagram on it,
right.
excavated from those tunnels.
Right. And I just find this incredibly interesting because on either side of the aisle, like regardless of what side you take, you are a conspiracy theorist. When you zoom out, because to claim that all across the country that there were therapists colluding together to be able to implant false memories, of which, by the way, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, her Lost in the Mall study, I did a huge breakdown on this whole thing. She lied. Absolutely no false memories were ever implanted in anyone in that study. And she lied to her colleagues that peer reviewed it, and they sent it right through. I don't know if they knew she lied or if they even read it, but it comes down. There were 30 participants in this Lost in the Mall study. I think 6 of them dropped out mid study, which is unheard of. And if that ever happens in a study, they stop the study and start over, or they do something else, but they don't continue the study. So, I mean, we're talking 24 participants by the time the study is done. 4 participants were said to have had false memories implanted. When you look into these 4 people who had false memories implanted, not a single one of them actually had a false memory implanted. They were able to decipher which memory was actually false every single time. So,
Mhm.
false memories in the way that they present it through the False Memory Syndrome Foundation is a false narrative. Like it can't happen. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't problems with memory. Of course there are, but the way in which they portray it is a complete and utter lie.
Mhm. Yeah, it's bullshit. And what Ralph Underwager and everything, Ralph and his wife, Alita Wakefield, advanced here this notion that pedophiles should be more assertive.
Yeah,
We're seeing that today. Like the stuff that's on James Gunn's Twitter feed or Chrissy Teigen's Twitter feed or any number of other Twitter feeds,
right,
the things that came out and people started to highlight this. James Alefantis of the Pizzagate scandal,
right,
the owner of Comet Pizza, um, the things that were in their social media feeds, they were very assertive and very transparent
very.
about what they wanted. Rainn Wilson was very transparent. And,
Yes,
20, 30 years ago, you didn't joke about this kind of stuff because you would have gotten your ass kicked.
right,
Like the backlash against it. And it was severe once people became aware of it. That's why they were in such a rush to delete all of those tweets and everything. Is like if you didn't feel like you did anything wrong or that this was just a joke, albeit a joke in poor taste or poor humor, you would have left that up.
right,
But you deleted it because you knew that shit was wrong. And
right.
you knew you were about to suffer some serious repercussions. You were going to come under serious, severe scrutiny. And the backlash, it wasn't physical. None of you got your ass kicked. You should have gotten your ass kicked,
Yeah.
but you didn't. And here we are years later. And
Right.
what I say in my like Be Dangerous Utah series, I've done 2 commercials for that so far over on IRA, is it's millstone season.
Right.
And it's
Mhm.
millstone season. It's time to start handing out ass whippings like pieces of pie at Thanksgiving. Y- Like y'all got a problem with me saying it, but
Right.
if ever there was a time when an ass whooping was merited, it's these people who want to go on social media and joke about child rape and child abuse, who want to be in these Epstein files talking about torturing and killing children and their
Right.
intestines tasting like cream cheese because guess what? This is a baby. That's undigested breast milk
Right.
in their intestinal tract. That's why it tastes the way. And you're gonna sit here and joke about you should dress up like Jesus Christ before you rape her so this girl will not think that Christ is protecting her when she's being sexually abused.
Right.
Uh, oh, hell no. You got pictures of these people sitting on the airplanes and whatnot with prepubescent children, and there's no explanation as to whose child that
Yeah.
was or
Wasn't
why
wasn't that
they're on the.
amazing?
Yeah. And
Like,
you
I
want
mean,
to
there's
pretend like
pictures of
there's.
Epstein like standing next to a pool with all sorts of little kids in the pool, or like you said, with that prepubescent girl sitting on his lap, and that came out before these 3 million
There's
dropped.
multiple pictures of this.
Right.
And at the end of the day, he didn't have any children. His brother had two children, neither of which is this woman going around saying that she's Epstein's niece. And
Right.
what else did she say? She's Shia LaBeouf's sister, and they were split up. You want to talk about disinformation? That girl is part and parcel. These people have the same
Right.
playbook over and over and over again.
Right.
And these allegations that pop up against these people, what's his face, Brian Singer, the X-Men director,
Right.
he was accused of sexually abusing boys, and lo and behold, here comes a boy, now an adult, with an easily debunked story, and as a result, all the other allegations are said to be debunked too because this one individual was lying.
Yep.
The problem is the public doesn't realize that there was something called DEN, the Digital Entertainment Network, where a lot of people, including Brian Singer and Brett Ratner and these others, were allegedly involved in sex trafficking and sexually abusing young boys
Right.
who starred on this digital entertainment network, which was one of the first attempts to launch an online television movie
Right.
network. It was Netflix before Netflix, and of course, broadband had not caught on. The internet did not have the infrastructure to support it. But these men were coming over to this mansion where all these boys were staying, and they were engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior with them. And Brian Singer was one of those men. And,
Right.
Brian Singer conveniently faded off into the sunset because there were other allegations, just a multitude of allegations against him. And it's the same people over and over and over again
It's
doing
same
this.
thing as that there was that documentary that came out about all the Nickelodeon stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And you want to tell me that you went over to Jeffrey Epstein's house after he was convicted down in Florida on
Right.
those charges, and it was public knowledge that those charges were not the crimes he had committed. He did not solicit prostitution. He was raping children, and
Right.
everybody knew it. And he was still going to his dinner parties and his going to visit him in his island after that conviction, and after those stories were public knowledge. So I don't want to hear it. It's millstone season. And a
So,
lot of y'all have got ass whoopings coming to you at the minimum. Honestly, you should have a lot worse. And if the U.S. federal government does not want to do its job and prosecute you, incarcerate you, and execute you for what you did, if these state governments where this took place do not want to do the same, then we, the people, should do it. Because at the end of the day, it's
I second
enough.
that. I completely agree. Um, you know, with this McMartin case, there's a couple of notes that I think are incredibly interesting. Not that everything else that we've talked about hasn't been, but the jurors for the McMartin case, not one juror denied that these children were horrifically abused. The case, or the disagreement, came from whether it was performed at the school and if the people that were being accused were actually the ones guilty of it. So I find that incredibly interesting. So it's like the abuse was never even up for discussion, really. It was like everyone agreed with that, as far as the jury went. So it says, as for the McMartin case, there has never been any question that the children there were horrifically abused. And my question is if that's the case, who else would have been responsible for it if not the people running the daycare? Because
They
whether
were
they were
charged. They were charged with the wrong counts. The same way that
right,
Jeffrey Epstein was charged with the wrong count. He was charged with soliciting prostitution. Children cannot consent to be
right,
prostitutes. And at the end of the day,
right,
if you know anything about prostitution, it's a form of sex trafficking. A lot of those women in that position who are prostitutes
right,
aren't doing so of their own volition. They're doing it because they have a pimp or a sex trafficker threatening them and coercing them into that arrangement. So I don't want to
right,
hear this business about them being consenting adults and is sex work is real work and all this other bullshit that we hear about. We
100%.
we see like Sean Ryan covering Brand Army on his podcast, which is a gateway to the sexualization of children, so that when they turn 18, guess what? They'll be like this former child actor. They'll make $1 million in 24 hours. They'll make $3 million, I
Yep.
believe she made when she turned 18 and she started hitting OnlyFans. And you want to tell me she had that footage queued up and ready to go the minute she turned 18? No, that footage was recorded when she was 17 years old. And all of y'all consuming that footage and those pictures and those videos, I don't know
Yep.
what exactly she put up there, but all of it was recorded when she was a minor. And all of y'all going to hell with gasoline drawers. I don't want to hear any of this bullshit.
I completely agree.
Like,
Um, Also, rarely noted in the reporting of the McMartin trials, is that the matriarch of the McMartin family, Virginia McMartin, admitted on the stand that one of her own granddaughters believed that her own children had been molested at the school. Virginia McMartin, incidentally, was more than just your run of the mill preschool operator. In the mid 1960s, she achieved a sort of semi celebrity status in the childcare field and traveled extensively as a consultant, including stops in New Zealand, Australia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and England. Another notable aspect of the McMartin trial is that the defense team was allowed to subject the child witnesses to the longest pretrial hearing in the nation's history, facing a battery of as many as 7 rabid defense attorneys. The already severely traumatized children were verbally assaulted for weeks on end in a deliberate attempt to break them. The state made little effort to protect these young victims and witnesses. In the final analysis, the logical conclusion to be drawn from the McMartin case is that 460 kids did not all conspire to lie about the abuse they suffered. They also did not likely lie about their involvement in child prostitution and child pornography. They certainly did not lie about the tunnels under the school. They probably did not lie about their forced involvement in satanic rituals in which adults sheathed in black ceremonial robes uttered chants. In fact, at least one robe was seized from the home of a defendant, and perhaps most tragically, there is a good reason to believe that they did not lie about the blood sacrifices either.
yeah,
And I don't know what more people want at this point. McMartin was a satanic ritual abuse case, and it has been proven.
yeah, it's been proven. And at the end of the day, whether it's ritual abuse or any other type of abuse, you're having sex with children.
Right,
Like at the end of the day, you are having sex with children. You are transporting children to private residences and other businesses for the purpose of sexually abusing them. There's no innocent explanation for you to have tunnels under a 49-inch concrete slab with entrances inside of that preschool.
right.
None. There's no innocent explanation for that. There's no innocent explanation for the things that were found in those tunnels. And there's no innocent explanation for the district attorney's failure to secure conviction in either trial, given the facts that you just outlined. It is millstone season. It's been millstone season for years now. The question is whether we're going to do anything about it. We're already
Right.
in a class war. We're already in a moral war. The only
Right.
question is who's going to win it. And if you have a child out there and you're watching this, uh, the reality of it is you may say it's not my child doing it. It's not my house. It's not my community. Yes, it is. You just don't know about it yet.
Right.
And the reality of it is if you would normalize it for another child to go through this kind of horrific abuse, then don't be surprised when it comes home to roost for you when it comes to your doorstep and it's your child or your grandchild or your niece or your nephew or some child down the street that you know. Don't be surprised. This is a zero tolerance issue. And what I'd say to every public official out there, you serve us, whether you think you do or you don't. At the end of the day, the system of government we have set up, if our elections aren't legitimate, the solution's not going to be political. If you're not going to give us that, like a legitimate, legal election that produces outcomes consistent with the democratic will of the people, then guess what? We can get rid of you too. If you want to line
Amen
up
to
with
that.
these people, if you want to line up with these people, and you want to be part and parcel with this, you want to be a party to the sexual abuse and torture of children. You want to be a party to the sex trafficking of children by your donors. Who, let's all be honest, we live not in one person, one vote. We live in $1, one vote. That's the system of government we have. It's got to change. And what I would say to you is, it is millstone season. It's time to start handing out ass whoopings and vigilante killings. Luigi Mangione did nothing wrong except getting caught. Like at the end of the
Right.
day, the man that he killed, it it's systemic in our country and in our world. The man that he killed, how many people did his company kill by denying coverage that they had paid for with their insurance premiums?
Right.
We live in an absolutely corrupt society. It's not just. I've been working at Hamlet case for 4 years, and I have tried to stay within the boundaries of the law. I have not touched any of these people, but what I'm telling you is, this is your community, Utah. These people did it in your backyard, and they did it with the consent and the cooperation of your elected leaders, many of whom were part of this. That's why David Hamlin can't be convicted, is because he could flip on all of those people.
Yep.
And God knows what kind of material he's got out there in terms of compromise on the people that he compromised over the years. The secrets that he knows is those are the reasons, those are his insurance against ever being convicted and held accountable for what he did to his daughters and hundreds of other people that he abused. Adults, children. He was a sexual predator and an opportunist who would abuse anybody, children or adults, male or female. That's who he is, and he walks around with impunity and Provo and an American fork. Everywhere he goes, he gets to do what he did. He's still doing it. He'll do it till the day he dies because
Oh, I
pedophiles don't
wholeheartedly
rehabilitate,
believe that.
sexual abusers don't rehabilitate, and if you think that this Ray Bucky individual, who's still alive, by the way, ever stopped doing what he was doing, I got news for you. He didn't.
Lawrence King is still alive and living in North Carolina, I believe.
Yeah, Lawrence
And
King,
he's
Larry King of the Franklin Credit
yep.
Union, the Franklin scandal, as it's been named, he's still out there. And if you think he lost his appetite for young flesh and children and the sex trade, I got news for you. He didn't. He just relocated.
Yes, sir.
And this stuff is still going on. He may not be facilitating it for the wealthy and the powerful and the politically connected the way he was back in the day, but he's still doing something. He's got one marketable skill set. It certainly isn't running a bank. It's
Yeah,
trafficking children.
he sure failed at that miserably
Yeah.
too, because
Yeah. And all of those
it's quite
children,
obvious.
Paul Bonacci and those girls, everybody that he abused that got pilloried in the press, at the end of the day, we all know what's up. We all know what they did. And it's no accident that George H.W. Bush, who in those Franklin files was having sex with a young black boy named Brant, shows up in the Epstein files is sacrificially murdering and sexually torturing another child, another young black man. So I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that it's just an allegation or a panic or a hysteria. Nah, it's not. We all know what Epstein was up to. So did all the people who attended his dinner parties and went to his island after his conviction. And so does every elected representative who voted against the release of those files and stonewalled it, including Donald J. Trump. And I tell you, Donald J. Trump, he cast his lot. He chose his class of people over a decent society. He deserves to burn in hell for what he did. And the only regret I have is that in Butler, Pennsylvania, that boy missed when he took a shot at him because he'd been doing the world a service based on what I've seen with this Epstein issue. And Joe Biden, his own son, in the Hunter Biden files, is calling him Pedo Peter. And his daughter Ashley is talking about being molested in her diaries by Joe Biden. So I don't want to hear that any of these people are exculpated or they're innocent. They are not. They are part of a system that systematically rapes and abuses children. And they can all go to hell. And we should send them there as soon as possible. Enough is enough. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a reality. And these people conspired to rape and traffic and murder and torture children. The point of this
Right.
episode was to present the facts of the McMartin preschool case to show you that the corroborative evidence that these children were telling the truth. They were telling the truth about the abuse, they were telling the truth about the tunnels, and in two separate criminal cases, the people who abused them got off. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It is millstone season. It's time for men to be dangerous. It's time for men to be out breaking shit. And if you don't want to give us an election that's legitimate to replace you, we'll replace you some other way. Enough
I'd
is
just like
enough.
I'd like to remind people the McMartin case broke 46 years ago this year. And in fact, it's coming up. I believe it was in April when this story first broke. So we're literally coming up on 46 years where this broke, where 460 kids across three different facilities and one, I don't even want to call it a babysitting service. I don't know what you would call that in a motel. Um,
In
Obviously a
the Mormon
trafficking
world, they
ring.
call it baby tenders. That's what they called it in the 80s in Bountiful.
Right,
No, I mean, these
right,
people were operated off the same playbook over and over and over again.
right. And I don't know how much more people need. you know, this stuff is out there, and
Yeah.
at a certain point, you're just denying it because I think people, if they admit that this is happening, then they have to do something.
It's flaunted in front of you on social media. We all know what's going on social. We know these celebrities are joking about pedophilia. And like I said, 30 years ago, they wouldn't have done that because they'd have got their ass whooped. And
Not anymore.
the problem is they're so damn emboldened that they think they can do this with impunity. They think they can joke about child rape and child sexual abuse with impunity and still retain their system. Think about the fact that Hollywood didn't immediately expel these people like James Gunn and Bryan Singer and Chrissy Teigen and others and say, look, we can't have you representing us. They are perfectly fine with this going on. And that speaks to volumes about the bifurcation between an ordinary person's values and their values. It speaks volumes about the Lord that they actually serve. And even if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, you don't believe in Lucifer or Satan, you don't believe in any of that, at the end of the day, what you have to believe in is that human beings are endowed with dignity and inalienable rights, and the children are off limits. And if you want to live in a decent, functioning society, not the shit show we have now, something has to be done about this. It's a select minority of people who are starting and continuing these problems. Period. And it's relatively easy to deal with it. You knock a few thousand people off, and a lot of this goes away. And if the government doesn't want to do it by prosecuting them and doing their job, convicting them, throwing them in prison, and making an example out of it, then we, the people, need to do it. Straight up. It is what it is. This is a time for you to choose which side you're going to be on, what type of society you want your children and grandchildren to grow up in. And this is unacceptable. These people are telling the truth when they come forward, and time again, they get railroaded by our criminal justice system. Look at what happened to the Epstein victims. That when they were asked if Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice had contacted them at that most recent congressional hearing, and they all raised their hands to say no. The Department of Justice is not in the business of justice. It's not in the business of enforcing the law if it is someone who donates to a political campaign or someone who funds a politician. It is past time to remind these people there are limits to what we'll tolerate. And we will not tolerate this. Enough is enough. You can lie, you can cheat, you can steal, but what you cannot do is rape and murder and torture children. Enough is enough. You can't sit here.
Right. And if we don't draw that line in the sand, I mean, where's the limit then? I
Yeah.
just I can't imagine if that's not the line, where is the line? And
Well,
I'd be horrified to find out if that's not the line.
yeah, and I want to be absolutely clear with people. I am encouraging reciprocity. I don't give a damn what the personal cost to me is in doing so. Enough is enough. You got to have some law and you got to have some order. And this has gone far enough. If the government does not want to take notice of our outrage and start doing its job, we need to do their job for them because we can't have this. Enough is enough. Like, straight up. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Y'all all know what the deal is. Y'all know what these people are doing. Eh, If you choose to turn a blind eye to it, here's the thing: less than 10% of the population overthrew the British Empire in America. It takes a small, committed group of people who are willing to put the pedal to the metal and do what needs to be done. And the rest of y'all, the 90% who stay on the sidelines, you need to start thinking about what you're going to say to God when you see him. You need to start thinking about the fact that you were an accomplice after the fact by staying neutral in this. And you're just as bad as anybody who actually did these things. Enough is enough. These victims have been telling the truth in multiple cases for as long as I've been alive. And it's not a satanic panic, it's not a false memory, it's real. And today's episode has been about driving home that point, one of the most infamous cases of ritual abuse, the most infamous set of abuse allegations from the 80s. I'd like to thank my guest, Jacob K. Johnson of Rise to Liberty. I'll leave it to you to make any concluding remarks you want to make. Jacob, thank you for being on today.
Of course, thank you for having me on. Honestly, this is a case that, I've kind of avoided just because of the extreme backlash that usually comes. And, over the past few weeks, I've just been kind of just throwing caution to the wind and just saying, screw it, because I think all you have to do is scratch the surface with this case and realize exactly how egregious it all was. You don't have to go far. There's plenty of books, there's plenty of information online that isn't censored. There's plenty of information out there. And honestly, just go listen to the kids yourselves. You can find them. It's not hard. Um, you just actually have to put in a tiny bit of effort to be able to find this information. If I can find it, anyone can find it. Um, so yeah, I would like to thank you for having me on to be able to discuss this case. Um, if this is something that your audience is interested in, you can find me pretty much anywhere at Rise to Liberty. The most active places I am is X, Instagram, and Telegram. Those are the most active places I am. You can find all of my links at allmylinks.com/rise to liberty, and it pulls up everywhere I am, pulls up my donation links, my contact information, absolutely everything. And also over on my channel, I stream to Rumble, YouTube, and X. And every Wednesday, I do a Satanic Panic is Real series where we're going through pretty much everything, all the cases. We're going through everything. I just started it a few weeks ago. It's going to end up being hundreds of episodes, I'm sure, hundreds, if not thousands at some point. So, but we're going through all of the old reporting. We're going through case files. We're going through just literally everything. Witness testimony, survivor testimony, all of it. So we're looking at the people that were implicated. We're looking at, Anton LaVey. We're looking at little Mikey Aquino. We're looking at all of these cases. And so we will be going over all of that if it's something you guys are interested in. Also, I do cover, mind control, because I think that's what a lot of this comes down to is we have a society that's been mind controlled and brainwashed, which is why people accept this sort of behavior. And it's my mission to be able to expose not only the satanic panic being real, but also mind control being real, and realizing that this is what we're experiencing. So that's it's pretty much where I'm at. So once again, thank you again for having me on.
Thank you for being on, and thanks for being a dangerous man because we need more of them.
Thank you.
And not only in Utah, but elsewhere, because this has got to stop. And all of the documents that we're referencing here today are going to be uploaded on investigationsandritualabuse.com, just like the documents from the Hamlin case and other related matters have been uploaded so that you can examine it and make up your mind for yourself. Um, that includes the scientific report on the McMartin case, any court records that I'm able to procure. Your donations go towards that. Um, so we're going to be expanding beyond the Hamlin case in terms of putting a lot of those documents up on investigationsandritualabuse.com, including any documents that I'm able to procure from Martin prosecutions and trials. So I thank you for watching, and this seems like a good place to cut it off. We will talk to you in another couple of weeks, in which I hope to have some others like Jacob who are allies in this fight. We had Justin Riggs on previously. These are the men who are standing against this, and you need to support them. You need to support Rise to Liberty and LDS Abuse. You need to support Brett Henry and Carl Crusher and others who are making a stand against this. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching and thanks for reading. This is Goel from investigationsandritualabuse.com with my guest, Jacob Johnson of Rise to Liberty.